Hello again, friends! And you are our friends, and this is my show. And welcome back to Jim Cornette's Drive Thru right here, wherever it is that you are on this beautiful summer day/evening, could be morning, you could be anywhere. I'm your host, the great Brian Last, and the man who'll be answering your questions, as well as reviewing some modern wrestling and more. The leader of the cult of Cornette, the post office ninja, Mr. Jim Cornette.
You could be stuck in the trunk of a 76 Buick in a salvage yard somewhere in Trenton, New Jersey, about to get the hook and be carried into the compactor. And the last words that you would hear are the dulcet tones of Jim Cornette and Brian Last as we entertain the masses, elucidate, educate, for your edification, the entertainment here. And it is indeed your show, Brian, as always, and far be it from me to direct your show in any manner or direction that you would not want it to go. I am but a lump of clay here in your hands that are ready to be molded by you today, because I'm in a good mood again. The baby birds are doing great. I got to start with my bird update. I'm going to give everybody the bird update. 3 times in the last week or a little bit more, there have been severe thunderstorms and high damaging winds predicted. And 3 times, like a beneficent cone of protection, the storms, the bad part, has gone south of here, or north of here, or east of here, or west of here. But as I've been sitting there worried about those poor little yapping baby birds and their cute little beaks, the severe weather has parted around my area of town like a cone of protection, and they're doing great up there. I got to watch the morning feeding today, and then somebody who claims it's his show was a little bit late today, needed more time, so I was able to go out there and watch the midday feeding. And the baby, by the time that we have any more crummy weather, I'm thinking that they'll be able to fly off on their own. Their little tufts of feathers are just so cute now. So that's the bird update for anybody who was worried about my birds.
I don't think anyone cares about the birds.
Oh, come on! Oh, for heaven's sake, are you going to start the day like that? Here I am, happy, in a good mood, ready to be molded by you like the lump of clay that I am, agreeable, ready to entertain the masses, my baby, and you're going to piss all over my baby birds. What kind of Simon Legree, what kind of fucking Simon Bar Sinister, what kind of goddamn Ebenezer Scrooge McDuck are you anyway, pal?
I think you're confusing fans giving you the bird with fans caring about your bird.
There have been a lot of birdie fans over the years that have waited. I just wanted to give you in case anybody was worried, because we had some bad weather around the area. I didn't want anybody to think that the birds had lost their home.
Are they related to Bertie Sanders?
They may be, because, Bertie was here regularly for a couple of years, but I think he got mad every time he built a nest in the garage. I'd close the garage door at night and he wouldn't be able to get in and out. So he moved out to the evergreens out at the end of the driveway. Is this a good time for me to talk about the big news about me and Bret Hart having the NFTs before just about anybody? Because we're just trendy, me and Bret.
You guys got the NFTs. I'm so sorry. Is there a cure for this?
No, we're
penicillin?
We're taking shots right now for it. But, I've neglected to mention last week, but I will go ahead and say that the fine folks that are doing my upcoming collectible NFTs, the electronic trading cards, as I refer to them, are also releasing Bret Hart's official NFTs. They go on sale on July 5th, the week after mine. But anyway, as we mentioned, and I'll just briefly run it down, folks. Our friends at Rarities, with a WR, just like wrestling, Rarities is coming out with the first pro wrestler NFTs by yours truly, the leader of the cult of Cornette. And there's 4 levels. As we mentioned, the bottom level, level 4, is limited to 500 cards. Level 3, limited to 100 cards. And those go on sale on Sunday, June 27th at noon Eastern at ProWrestlingNFT.com. And the level 2, the Signature Series, they're 3 individual cards, all 3 different, and embossed with my autograph. Those will go up for auction, as well as the unique level 1, the Cornette face card, that is only one of a kind in the world. And the levels 1 and 2 come complete with the winner of the auction will receive a ring-worn Jim Cornette outfit, jacket, shirt, tie, and pants. The Signature Series gets that along with a handwritten letter of authenticity and thank you from me. And the Cornette face winner, the unique individual that gets this one-of-a-kind, also gets a full ring-worn outfit and a racket, all autographed, with a handwritten letter of authenticity and a thank you video message. We're doing a complete package for the Cornette fanatic. Anyway, those go up for bid at the same time. Those top 2 levels on Sunday, June 27th at 12 noon Eastern at ProWrestlingNFT.com. And all you got to do, go to the website. It has directions. You'll be able to get more information, and you got to have and they don't take corny coins yet. We're still negotiating the corny coins, but they do take the cryptocurrency. And so you'll be loading up your wallet with the cryptocurrency. It tells you how on the web. Well, all you people out there are much more technologically proficient than I am, so you know these things. I'm just reading all this stuff for the very first time. Anyway, that's what's happening then. It's very exciting, Brian. I can hear the excitement in your breathing now. Either that or you're possibly having a slight fucking coronary episode, one or the other.
Actually, I was on mute, but close.
I thought I heard you, but well, maybe it was Harley Quinn from the other room I was hearing breathing in a heavy and curt fashion.
You may want to check on that. What's going on with Harley Quinn in the other room?
I don't know.
That's a tiny dog.
Well, hey, who are you? It's not the size of the dog in the fight. It's the size of the fight in the dog. She can whip your dog Swami any day.
Oh, give me a break. Swami's tough. Tough.
Who did Swami ever beat?
Well, he hasn't had that many matches, if we're going to be honest. But
has he been properly trained?
Trained to fight?
Or to work, at least.
To work? What? Work? What?
Well, remember Arnold? Scott Steiner's pit bull he had back in the 90s? He guest managed the Steiner brothers in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Arnold was a hell of a worker. He'd go up to the guys and scare the shit out of them, and he had such a big fucking mouth, he would... the guys were generally treed up on the toilet in the bathroom, and Steiner had them on a fucking leash, Arnold, and he would let Arnold get just close enough when they're sticking their foot out, like, no. Arnold would take their whole goddamn boot in his mouth, and he wouldn't chew it where it would mark the boot up, but he would just work and bite. And, Bobby Eaton, he had him in Savannah, Georgia, I think it was, at the arena in the bathroom up on the toilet with his left foot and his right foot in fucking Arnold Steiner's mouth. And Scott was just dying laughing. So we made him the manager when they came to work with the Heavenly Bodies in Smoky Mountain. And in Knoxville, Johnson City, Barberville, Kentucky, and I want to say Hazard. Arnold was tied to the ring post in the corner, and if poor Jimmy Del Rey, because Dr. Tom Pritchard had a little seniority, and he stayed mostly away from Arnold, but Arnold fucking persecuted poor old Jimmy Del Rey. He can work, that dog.
All right, well, let's see if another dog could work today. Well, that's an awful transition, but let's talk about a dog of a show.
I should mention one more thing before we talk about that, but this is your show.
Yes.
And far be it from me. Update this coming week on The Experience, which is my show. It's mine. You can't have it because it's mine. It's The Experience. I'll have the details on the Great American Cameo Bash in July, but we're going back on the air on Cameo on Sunday, July the 11th. But it's gonna be figured out a little bit differently because people have been getting shut out. They've been getting frustrated. They can't type their shit in quick enough. By the time they get finished, we're all sold out. So we're gonna
Make it 100 people at $300 a pop.
No.
Get in now. Save up.
God damn it.
You don't need food.
You know, some of these fucking fans are a little bit goddamn ungrateful. It's just like, you know, I've noticed, I mentioned this to you about your children, and it's also, I've noticed with wives, you feed them one day, they're turn around the next day, they're ungrateful, they want to eat again, just for no reason. But anyway, we're going to do it a little bit differently. Sunday, July 11th at noon Eastern, but we'll have all the official details once we see how much trouble this is going to get us into on how it's going to be hopefully easier for you not to get shut out in Cameo Land for the summertime. Summertime, and the weather is groovy.
Well, you don't want to get shut out of that, and if you're a shut-in, maybe you watch the WWE Hell in a Cell pay-per-view extravaganza, which
should have been shut down.
which was on Peacock as well, which most of us watched it on, but you actually attempted.
No, I did. I attempted. You are correct. I attempted. I didn't get it done. I tried because
through no fault of your own.
It's easier for me because I like my cable remote. I know where all the buttons are. And also I like the fast forward feature. That comes heavily into play with some of these shows. And so I just order the pay-per-view because what the fuck, right? Instead of going through all this streaming fancy Dan, modern technology bullshit. So I ordered it, as I always do, and I set the DVR to record it, as I always do. But to paraphrase Jerry Seinfeld, it's not the purchasing or the recording of the pay-per-view, but it's the fulfillment, the delivery of, the broadcasting of, and reception of the pay-per-view. I felt like I was working for Ring of Honor again. Because all I got was a fucking screen that we cannot process your order. Call customer service at BR549. And I found this out, obviously, the morning after. There's got to be a morning after. Remember when poor Chef almost married the succubus? But anyway, nevertheless. So I told you, I said, that's why your program is delayed. I'll take the heat here. I said, we got to delay the program this week because I've got to have time to fucking now go and, I figured this out. And also I went to sleep on the Most Wanted Treasures season finale, not because it was boring. We'll talk about that too, but because it was almost 8:30 and on a Sunday night, and I'd had a big breakfast for dinner. Stacey and I, we had bacon and eggs and sausage and things. And so I went to sleep. So I had a lot of stuff to catch up on yesterday. That's why we're late. But I did learn how to get to the cock and watch the cock and navigate around the cock.
I will say, I've been watching the events on Peacock since they first started. I thought this was the best one in terms of the ability to pause the event, to go back, to go forward. Thought it was really well done. I watched it live. What was it like for you? Again, you're not Mr. Technology. You were expected to watch it on your TV. What was it like for you watching it on Peacock?
Well, there's one glaring problem. The fast forward is not visual. It's not a speed search. You can see the counter, but all you see is the counter moving up. You don't see where you're going and what you're missing. Because I've found out that especially on modern WWE events, if you search or skip through the entrances, which are interminable, you can save half of your life. But then you're just having to guess. And now with the pay-per-views, as we so quaintly still call them, commercials, fucking dreck and filler in between matches. There's poor Jerry Lawler with DJs and various ancillary personnel talking about they're hosting the show that talks about the show that talks about the show they just did. So you need fast forward with a lot of these big events these days to get through the middle shit where they're trying to sell you on watching more shit that you don't want to see because the main show's not that good. So that's my problem. They need a visual speed search. For heaven's sake. Did you weren't going to bring that up? You weren't going to mention that?
Well, I watch Peacock. I stream it on one of my monitors at my desk, and then I shoot it to the TV. So whenever I want to...
you just shoot it to the TV.
It's very simple. It takes a second.
You just shoot it right over
It's so simple. Even you could do it. And...
Wait a minute. It's so simple. Even you
who dismisses any change in technology, any progress, even
some
you.
Simpleton like me, just some fucking pin-headed moron, some mope like me could do it.
See, I think the frustrating thing is knowing how clever you were with VHS and beta. I'm one of the people that believe that if you ever took a couple of days just to figure out some of these things, you would master it right away.
It made sense then. You know why? Because everything was labeled in or out, audio or video. If you could fucking master that, you had it made. But anyway, so you have some type of on-screen fast-forward search feature is what you're building up to say to me?
Right, because it's originating from my computer, although I'm watching it on my TV. If I move the mouse over the video, then it indicates the ability to pause it or fast-forward or rewind, or I think it's 10 seconds forward, 10 seconds back. Once you hover over the video and you're still watching it on your TV. The wonders of modern technology.
Why don't you just spend some more time hovering over that mouse? Let me know how that works out for you. So is this your show?
It once was. You got a problem with the mouse?
I'm not the one hovering over a poor mouse. Leave the mouse alone. The mouse.
You don't hover over the mouse. You use the mouse to hover the little indicator on the computer screen.
Oh, now you're using the poor mouse. What did the mouse ever do to you? They just sit in the corner and eat cheese.
Well, besides
shit everywhere. They, you know. Here's the thing about mice. They're nice little pets, but they have no bowel control or bladder control. They just, as they move, they just randomly piss and shit.
So you're saying they're awful pets?
Well, no, but they're cute and loving and furry.
Oh, they just defecate everywhere. That makes them an awful pet. I'm sorry.
They just leave trails of feces and urine everywhere. But it's not that much because they're little small things.
Well, it wasn't a small thing, unfortunately. It went on and on and on, and that was Hell in a Cell. Now, we previously talked about the fact they took Roman Reigns and Rey Mysterio off the show.
Yeah.
Jim, before we review the show, having watched it, what do you think about that idea now after the fact?
Well, was that going to be... Here's the... Would they have then had 3 Hell in a Cell matches? I
guess, yeah.
I mean, that's ridiculous on the surface of it. I would think, if you... Since they have pushed Roman Reigns as their top guy, if you have anything that you're trying to market as a big show, and you just a few days beforehand take the biggest star in your company off of it, that would suck and be I don't understand why they would do that. But could they have put Drew McIntyre and who's he? What's he? Bobby Lashley, God bless him. Could they have put them on TV and left Roman Reigns and Rey Mysterio, who one would think would be a bigger draw for a big event, or they don't care because now it's all television anyway. But I'm in favor of doing anything that would have led to them only having one fucking cage match on the show so that it would have meant more. I was gobsmacked. So if they would have had 3 before they took that off, then that would have just been ridiculous. That's like, remember last week on the show, I said, that's like, hey, let's go across the street and eat at Chili's and have a nice dinner there before we come back over here and have dinner at Olive Garden or Carrabba's. You shot Olive Garden down. Then that would be like leaving there and going over to Outback and really having a nice steak dinner.
Oh, yeah, at Outback.
Oh, you got to tell, if...
You don't think that's a good restaurant. You don't really believe that.
Outback is very consistent. And I love their appetizers. But here's another thing. And the goddamn, their Awesome Blossom, the Bloomin' Onion. But here's another thing. when people are actually asking me to do cameos about your rotten taste in food, you should not be the one to just be scoffing at random about anything. Point being,
That doesn't mean anything. All that means is someone who appreciates my taste is smart enough not to pay you to cut a promo about it.
There is someone that appreciates your taste in food. We have just not found them yet after a worldwide search.
No, they're there. It just wouldn't make sense, because why would someone say, hey, Jim, I want to pay you to cut a promo about just how good Brian's food choices are? No one wants to hear that.
You would think one of your fans would take up for you and support you.
You would think.
Anyway, back to this fucking show. I did watch the cold open, and they're getting so artsy, because we've said the studio, they've got great people there, great video editors, great technological production people of all kinds. But now they've finally got to the point where if they don't put wrestling footage over the cold open, you wouldn't even know that it had to be a wrestling program. Some faceless female DJ's mouth and a microphone, and they put some wrestling footage over the top of it, or elsewise it would have had absolutely nothing to do with a professional wrestling show. Did you notice this?
You're not wrong, but that's not new.
Oh, I just haven't been watching the cold opens, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mentioned the fast forward not being on the screen. I knew you were going to just persecute me if I did not watch all of the cage matches that were on this show, and that's my first thing. I have nothing against Bianca Belair and Bayley, but a cage match to open the show on a show where your main event is a cage match is just, and a girls' cage match with weapons. On the positive side of things, Bayley, I love. She's really probably the best working attitude heel girl in the company. You can tell she was the one that was obviously leading this. She's the veteran, and she was holding it together, but she's got facial. She's got the strut. She's bitchy. She does everything well. And Bianca Belair, I'm not. Her promo delivery was somewhat robotic and/or memorized reciting of lines, but that's not even unusual these days. Apart from the skipping and twirling the hair and the rap music entrance, because I hate that music, it was horrible. That reverse, as soon as I saw her coming out and skipping and the music, I said, okay, she's the heel and Bayley's the baby face, because Bayley had the rock and roll looking girl. But Bianca is a great athlete. She's still painfully small, but she's a great athlete. I would have liked to have seen a wrestling match between these two young ladies, and I would have rated this higher. But it had, whether male or female, as I mentioned, a cage match to start a show where the main event's a cage match. Not just a cage match, but to Hell in a Cell. Not just a Hell in a Cell, but they've got weapons under the ring. And that, they did a good job with this, but having to do contrived spots over who gets control of the chair. They've got 2 chairs in the ring the first minute in. They get stairs in the ring. But then they have to figure out a way to not use them over and over again, because that would be fucking foolish. But then the kendo sticks. So I had more praise for Bayley as looking at my notes. Bayley is real good. She's always in the right place. Everything looks solid. She has good timing. She was figuring out ways to show off Bianca Belair's athleticism. I even liked the spot where she tied Bianca to the rope by her hair. That's something a heel would do. But then when we came into the kendo sticks, I said, fucking hell. Here now, the first match on the show is the girls in a cage with chairs, stairs, and kendo sticks. Now Bayley got from under the ring kendo sticks taped end to end. What purpose would that serve? Why would you ever have a thing like that? unless you had gone out there and fucking put them under there for just such a purpose, which is beggar's belief that anybody would go to that goddamn length. And she bridges the ring and the cage, and they try to do the spot. Obviously, you know what's coming. She gets put through her own kendo sticks with a spine buster on the floor. She gets rolled back in the ring or whatever, and Bianca Belair brings a chair in and unloads on Bayley's back after she's been spine bustered through a bridge of kendo sticks onto the floor. And she's back up and on offense seconds later because they have more spots to do. And that's where I said, fuck it. I will watch if they ever have an actual match as a rematch. But then since I had no on-screen fast forward capability, I go 5 minutes down the road thinking certainly if a woman has just got spine busted through multiple kendo sticks on the floor and then et cetera, beaten with a chair, 5 minutes later, it's going to be over with. They're having a tug of war with a fucking ladder in the ring. Every match now, male or female, almost in the wrestling business is the same. Ladders, furniture, no DQ, no sense, contrived spots, playing with implements. So I fast forwarded 3 more minutes. And Bianca Belair was hitting Bayley with a face-first DVD Death Valley driver on the ladder in the ring and got the 1, 2, 3. And that's a ridiculous move to let guys 6'6" and 250 pounds do, much less the girls, unless somebody's having fucking facial reconstruction surgery. But this was hat on a hat all the way. And I even like the competitors, but I can't stand when the guys have these matches most of the time. And for the girls to open the show with it, what? Jesus, help me. Help me.
I agree with your assessment of both. Well, I agree with your assessment of Bayley. She's great. Every role she's had, she's been great. I hate to look at it like they're roles, but they are at this point. She's good in the ring. I really like Bayley. I like Bianca a lot more than you do. I don't think the issue I had here was the actual 2 wrestlers. It was the match. I didn't like the match. I didn't like the layout. I groan at this point whenever I see a kendo stick in any match.
Yes.
And it was here in the opening match. And I get it. If you're doing 2 Hell in a Cells on a show, it probably is the best thing to space them out. So I understand opening with it and closing with it.
I think you should space them out about a couple of months or so.
I don't disagree with you. I don't think it should be 3 within 3 days. I don't know about that. But I didn't like it. I'm not like you. I don't just say, and you could tell me that this isn't what you mean, or maybe it is exactly what you mean, but I'm not going to just dismiss it as they're girls, it's a cage, or they're girls and they're weapons. I'm not a big fan of men with weapons, except when the time is right. But I don't have a problem with them being in the cage, but I didn't like the match. You're in the cage, and then it still is this wild Falls Count Anywhere match, except it actually, the falls only count in a small little area. It's a Falls Count area match, but they can only count within this space right here.
See? Just a modicum of thought to some of these things. But that's... And again, it just makes it harder on all the talent, male or female, if you're allowing human beings that are 5'6" and 130 pounds to be bashed about with steel stairs and folding chairs and brick sticks, pots, pans, and tin cans. Well, then what should you need to do to the fucker that looks like Bobby Lashley? A bazooka or a goddamn Gatling gun? Anyway, speaking of Bobby Lashley, he was in a backstage interview segment for seconds when I've tried to get my fast forward stabilized with MVP and a bunch of models. And one of the girls apparently was 7 feet tall or standing on a box so she could be seen. I don't know. What was that all about?
Having fun with the ladies. I think he's one of the best things they have going. He acts like he's a big sports star. He's legit. him and MVP aren't clownish or silly. They're amazing. I think they're great. I think, that's something that would fit into wrestling at any point.
And they actually dress like they have some money and they have some clout in the sports world or the celebrity world in general. But then I feel bad for guys that try to be serious personas and get over as athletes / stars / somebody you could look up to, when immediately following that was Alexa Bliss sitting on her swing in the back. And we'll talk more about it when we get to that attempt at a match, but the girl here is a good enough, I'll use this word, quote unquote, with the air quotes, actress. She could make you believe that she was evil in some way, or a bitch, or a heel, or whatever. If this material wasn't such dog shit and so stupid and silly, and instead of trying to make her a supernatural whatever, she was just a legitimate female personality of some description with a reason to be there, that's obviously not going to be a great champion professional wrestler because she's 90 pounds, but she's got more emotion and personality and ability to do things than a lot of the girls there. So find something believable and realistic for her to do. Instead of, Svengoolie wouldn't show these movies, for heaven's sake. We love you, Rich. So anyway, the next match, one of the ones that we looked forward to and said should be pretty good, Cesaro and Seth Rollins. And even though they jump-started it, when Seth just came, the heel comes from behind and tackles Cesaro in the aisleway, which took off, the introductions and everything, some of the oof, but at least they took off, and they didn't go 100 miles an hour with just ludicrous gymnastics and choreography, but they had a fight. It paused a second for the bell to ring and then took off again. And Seth Rollins actually took a backdrop. Did you see that? You can watch 5 wrestling shows these days and not see one backdrop. They went out, WWE guys who respect the rules and are told to respect the rules somewhat when it's convenient, but they went to the floor for a minute, a little flurry, and back in, so they didn't bear the referee and it didn't look stupid. They kept it moving and did some good solid wrestling shit. The referee here, the young female referee, looks like a cashier at Arby's. Again, at least Ref Aubrey has some personality and some oomph. She's not allowed to do anything because none of the guys can follow the rules, but at least she looks like she has some oomph. But this girl was just kind of wandering around watching what was happening. And also, to be honest with you, I can buy Aubrey in AEW because most of those guys are child-sized. But with 2 guys the size of Rollins and Cesaro, visually, I think it'd be better to have a male referee to begin with, is because what's she going to do if they start trying to gouge eyeballs or fucking pull nuts out, for heaven's sake? Can you imagine? I thought about this too. You've brought this up lately. There are times now where fans will get kicked out of wrestling shows for using abusive language to the heels, right?
Yeah. Can
you imagine if any of the referees in the territory days had been female? What would have been said to them on a nightly basis? When the heel went over, when there was a fuck finish, and the guy, even whether the guys put heat on the referees or not, the referees in the territory days were routinely cussed out in every match, regardless of who won. Just if the heel was cheating, the referee would be cussed and called every kind of piece of shit and stuff that would get us kicked off of YouTube and etc. just in the course of every match. But they would be sometimes physically attacked, spit on, followed to the car if there was a real hot finish, and the people couldn't get to the heels. So can you imagine if they'd have had female referees in those days? Holy Christ. But anyway, I like this match overall. We could go move for move, but there was some nice stuff, but as a matter of fact, at one point I wished also, I can't figure out slow-mo on the cock. And Seth did a nice springboard knee to the side of the head. These guys know each other. They've worked well together. Claudio's so fucking strong. And I think with a crowd, this would have been one of the rockin' matches because they had nice false finishes and the 14 or 15 round big swing. The sharpshooter, then the crossface, then the sharpshooter again, then stomping Seth's arm. Claudio was really putting it on, and all of a sudden, Seth just small packaged him. 1, 2, 3. Boom. Done. See ya. Apart from just that finish came out of nowhere and did not impress anybody, I thought they had a good match. What'd you think?
It didn't connect with me at first. For whatever reason, Seth Rollins, who was in one of the best matches I ever saw live, him and Austin Aries in Ring of Honor, who is an incredibly talented guy, there's something in the last couple of years that every time I see him, I just kind of want to turn the TV off or, do something else. There's something annoying about him. Took me a little while to get past that, and once I did, I thought the match got really good. I thought it was really, really good. And then the finish just came out of nowhere. And that was it. And then everything just moved on.
Once you got past your peevishness at him.
He's annoying. Yeah. It's just that voice and just every gimmick he's had for the last couple of years. Like
when we saw the Monday Night Messiah, that was pretty.
The Shield was great. He looked cool, didn't talk, wrestled his ass off. And then he started doing promos, and I said, oh no. And they got worse and worse and more scripted. And just the Monday Night Messiah, now he's fucking Steve Martin, the wild and crazy guy. I don't know what his gimmick is now. But there's just something missing. I don't know. I liked him better when he was a mute. I don't know.
and we had a mute at the time, and he turned out to be the best talker in the fucking company. Anyway, okay, next up was the package, the history package, attempting to explain or excuse or present a case for forgiveness of whatever is applicable here, the match between Alexa Bliss and Shayna Baszler. And I got to be honest with you, I watched the package. I had to go get some ice cream. I did not want to watch this match without ice cream.
That's not what I expected.
No, and I honestly, I had only taken a little bit out of my quart of that Breyer's like New York cheesecake strawberry ice cream, frozen dessert as they call it or whatever. I sat and ate this whole thing with a spoon watching this thing. Let me just start out by saying that, again, if this match had been presented in any arena in the territory days of any wrestling promotion, any territory, it would have caused a fucking riot. Because people would have been so insulted, confused, incensed, storming the box office, demanding their money back, screaming fake, phony. It would kill the town. The promoter, if you did something like this, nobody would have ever come back and bought another ticket. And now they do it on fucking worldwide television. I'm led to believe well, first of all, in the package. Besides the fact that they want us to think that Alexa Bliss in any way, shape, or form is going to last 2 minutes physically, with Shayna Baszler, who was an actual MMA fighter, or the apologize to the doll shtick, the sci-fi lighting all through the backstage area of the arena that they were in. She was running from the doll, and she's panicked. This is an MMA fighter, and she's running from a voodoo doll, and she panics and slams the door and puts the chain on the door. And then turns around, it's in the room. No, it's not. It's in the mirror. No, it's not. She breaks the mirror. It's still there. Before the match even started, I wrote, fuck all these people. This was ridiculous. And then they do a promo with Shayna Baszler where she gives no explanation of how she got out of that room or away from that evil doll. Because Telly Savalas couldn't get away from it. Sooner it got him. My name is Talkie Tina, and I don't like you very much. Telly fucking threw that goddamn doll in the garbage can, put a brick on that lid. Still got him. She got away. How did she do that? Anyway. What are you laughing about? These are legitimate questions.
I don't know, just you casually throwing Telly Savalas into the mix here. Kind of got me a little bit.
My name is Talkie Tina, and I'm going to kill you.
There aren't too many Tellys anymore.
No Tellys and even fewer Tullys. And and here's another name, Tilly. You don't hear many Tillys gone the way of Gladys and Ethel. Anyway, so they had this match. Baszler, the MMA shoot fighter, came out with a 350-pound tag team partner and a manager from Cirque du Soleil. And Alexa Bliss, who is the heel here? Is it the evil, demonically possessed, supernatural black bile vomiter, or the MMA fighter with the big tag team partner and the manager that outnumbers the 90-pound evil, satanic, fucking hell? So, basically the story of whatever this was Shayna Baszler would kick the shit out of Alexa Bliss, and Alexa Bliss would sell for a second and then start laughing and ask her to do some more. And she crawls weird also. She must be double-jointed or even triple-jointed, possibly a contortionist. Think she's a sword swallower, too? I didn't get your comment on that.
I'm not commenting on that.
You can get high-paying jobs for twisting your body into various conditions and permutations like she does. Anyway, at some point, Alexa Bliss hypnotized, apparently, Shayna Baszler, and then made a comeback, and then everything came to a halt when she turned around and hypnotized Nia Jax into slapping the dog piss out of old Reggie. Everything comes to a halt. Alexa Bliss standing in the ring staring at Nia Jax. Nia Jax with the dumbfounded look on her. Actually, a different type of dumbfounded blank look than she normally has. Normally, she's confused. This was just a trance. And she just fucking bitch slapped Reggie out of his socks. This is god-awful. And then somehow Alexa splashed. And by the way, I did have a tweet from somebody that said, yes, on our show last week, every time we were talking about Alexa Bliss, their Alexa was fucking just going crazy. Alexa! Anyway, she splashed Shayna off the top, 1, 2, 3. That was it. Then suddenly Nia Jax didn't realize what she did to Reginald. And Drek. And by the way, it was 50-50, 3 women's matches on this show, and this was definitely one too many. Fucking Jesus Christ. Drek, I say. Can you see that having happened in, let's say, the Carolina, Greensboro? It's 12,000 people there at the Greensboro Coliseum. The main event's going to be Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat, whatever the fuck, and on the undercard you have that match, and this girl is hypnotizing these people into doing things. Can you imagine they would have set the seats on fire and thrown shit into the ring.
But hey, would have been big in Argentina.
It would have been a Titanic in Argentina.
That's the only place that would have worked. I was watching this, and I've seen so many stupid Alexa Bliss things. At least they kept us away from, usually it's right before a Roman Reigns match, he does her little magic. But I realize I'm watching this, and in a lot of ways, I'm the target audience. I'm a wrestling fan. I enjoy weird comedy and weird entertainment. I like a lot of the shows that have been on Adult Swim over the last 20 years. I like David Lynch films. I love Twin Peaks. I like when they brought Twin Peaks back. It was the weirdest shit of all time. I like weird shit. And I like wrestling. And I hate the Alexa Bliss shit. I hate it. It's not good. I admit she's committed to the role. And I think she should get an agent to go to Hollywood and work on that. But I don't understand who the target audience for. Now, I put up a tweet about that just saying, if you enjoy this, why? Also, when did you start watching wrestling? And have you ever been embarrassed by wrestling? And most people responded back that no, they hate it. They're embarrassed by it. A lot of people said their kids are embarrassed by it. I don't understand what the audience is. Someone wrote to me, well, they move a lot of merchandise. They're the big merchandise movers now, The Fiend and Alexa. So there is something to that, and that is always that's always a metric that Vince looks at. But on the other hand, this is so bad. Someone else wrote, well, it's for kids, Brian. It's for kids. And I wrote, I didn't have the stats in front of me, but I thought I was right. From what I remember, kids are actually the very smallest demographic watching WWE. The smallest audience are whatever you would classify as kids. It's an older audience. And Dave Meltzer actually retweeted that and confirmed it, which is very nice. Thank you, Dave. Jumping in for the good guys for once.
I was about to say, well, you might need to recheck your stats if that's the case, if he supported it, but go ahead.
But that's the point. The kid audience is the smallest audience, yet the show feels like it's catered towards a young or dumb audience. And I don't understand why, because that isn't the audience watching. And I think a lot of people who watch out of habit more than any other reason.
Well, yeah, and I've said before, it's like an abusive relationship. When you've been a wrestling fan for so long, even though it sucks, you don't want to be the one to end it, blah, blah, blah. But I will say that it may not be a kid's audience, but at this point, anybody that's still watching their intelligence is suspect. Just because why would you do this to yourself anymore? But it's the wrestling bug that people get, and they don't want to be, excommunicated from the business until finally something happened, like when WCW closed down and all those people said, well, now WWF wrestling is going to be the only thing, so we're just going to find something else to do.
And you know what the other problem is, too? And we've said it before about The Fiend, even though he has a wrestling pedigree. He was not just I guess it was collegiate. I know at least he was a high school champion, but I don't even know if he was collegiate or not. But, of course, the background of being a Rotunda or Wyndham. He comes from that family. Yet with him, with Alexa, with a lot of other people of this generation in wrestling, there are people out there like the FTRs and the MJFs and others who really want to do this and do this well. And then there are other people, I think, they may get into it once they're in it, but they just want to be performers. And they just want to perform in one way or another. And if it wasn't this, they'd be out in Hollywood trying to do something else. And I'm not saying Alexa Bliss isn't good in her role as this. I'm saying the role sucks. It doesn't belong here. I hate it. Go away. I mean, she should be doing something with acting. That's clearly what her passion is. Yeah.
And I would fully support that. And you know what? Here's another thing. The colored Firefly Funhouse motif and everything. She's got the bright colors and everything going on. It reminds me, Brian, to be quite honest with you, of our favorite cereal. All those colors. And I was just thinking, if she would go out to Hollywood and start her day off with a good, healthy breakfast every morning and find some acting gigs, well, that would just be swell. Wouldn't it?
Magical.
It would be magical. All she needs to do is go to Hollywood and get the magic spoon. Many people have done that before, but right now, you can get the best magic spoon. You can stop it. Shut up. You can get the best magic spoon, the kind that you eat for breakfast. Our friends at Magic Spoon, the tastiest and healthiest cereal that you will ever shove down your gullet, folks. with 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, and only 4 net grams of carbs in each serving. 140 calories a serving. It's keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, low-carb, and GMO-free, but not taste-free nor value-free. Because, folks, you can eat it for breakfast. You can eat it like trail mix. You can eat it around the house. You can eat it any time of day or night, whether with milk or without. Just grab a handful. The available flavors where you can build your own custom bundle box are cocoa, fruity, frosted, peanut butter, blueberry, and cinnamon. And they're all delicious. We've tweeted some of the many testimonials that we get from people who have ordered time and time again. You go to magicspoon.com/Jim and use the promo code JIM, J-I-M, at checkout. You'll save $5 off of your order of a custom bundle of boxes of Magic Spoon. 100% happiness guarantee. If you don't like it for any reason, they will refund your money, you old dirty Grinch, you. No questions asked. But just get that next delicious bowl of guilt-free cereal at magicspoon.com/Jim and use the code JIM to save $5 off. Magic Spoon.
Yeah!
You don't even need to go to Hollywood to get that Magic Spoon.
Jake's been looking for that Magic Spoon for the last few years. He doesn't know where it left it.
Yeah, it's very important what you put in that spoon, though. This is healthy stuff.
That's right.
That's your show.
I don't remember what the next match was. You threw me off a little bit here.
Well, you're not taking notes. I'll tell you, it was Kevin Owens versus Fidel Castro.
Oh, that's why.
It's the next match.
Castro.
What army are Sami Zayn and Commander Nuts in? What did you call him that day? Commander Nuts or Major Nuts?
Whatever. Yeah, something.
Commander Aziz. What army are they in? What are they part of the resistance? Who are they resisting?
The Salvation Army. The Old Navy.
The Old Navy. Well, they are members of the Old Navy Army. And they fought Kevin Owens. And I knew that this was probably going to be pretty good at the start, because it's not like they haven't been wrestling each other for the past 20 years, and they like to wrestle each other. But they changed their story up a little bit. That Owens was having trouble breathing and was doing the coughing from the deadly Asiatic spikes that he got from Commander Nuts or Major Aziz or whatever his name is last week on television. But this was good action. It's all the stuff they usually do. At one point, and I don't know whether this was a brilliant sell job or for real, but when Zayn did the dive over the top rope, Steen sold his left wrist big, like one of those like jump up and to your feet and walk away because you think, oh shit, that could have been it type of sell. But maybe he was doing that on purpose. The referee held him back a little while. And then finally they restarted it, but he kept selling it through the whole match. Fantastic job of selling if it was not indeed hurt. And they did their stiff shit because they don't mind, face washing each other with their shoes and getting a bloody mouth or whatever the fuck, because that's, they're friends. But finally, again, this match, it just had a finish that came out of nowhere where they'd gone back and forth and hit a few things and some false finishes, and suddenly Zayn just rolls back in the ring. I think they'd been outside, but he hit his kick in the corner, boom, out of nowhere. 1, 2, 3. So that seemed sudden, like there was no, momentum. There was momentum going because they were doing things back and forth, but it wasn't like a sudden turning point had just come or whatever. It just came. What'd you think?
I think I'm going to be in the minority and say I didn't like it. I can't even exactly explain why. I just feel like I'm trying to think of other examples of this, and I'm sure there are. Maybe Cena and Orton. I've just seen these two guys too often together.
Yeah.
Too many times. To the point when they come out, it's just like, I don't care as much. As soon as I saw Kevin Owens, I looked up at one point. I was looking down, I was writing something. I look up. Not notes for this, by the way, obviously. I was just writing something else, but I look up and I just see him spit up, and I was like, oh, I don't need to see this. I wasn't crazy about it. It's not for me. I'm not the biggest fan of both guys, although I think Sammy shows a lot of personality in there. And I like Sammy in the ring. It's just I don't like these matches and these two guys. I've seen them work together too many times. What do you think, Jim, about the news that Kevin Owens is legitimately taking time off?
Well, I saw that, and then I saw some report on the internet that they thought that it was storyline related. So I don't know what the reasoning behind it is. Did he hurt his wrist, or is it some story that they're going to do, or whatever? I don't know. But they usually acknowledge when somebody gets hurt. And the crypticness of, but he likes to be cryptic. But the crypticness of, I'm going to go away for a little while. Well, how can we miss you if you won't go away? So that's maybe a positive. But it sounds kind of story to me. Maybe this was just good timing.
It is a nice time of the year in Montreal. And they usually, I don't know how things are right now, but
when is that, by the way? They said, no, I josh the folks in Montreal.
I don't know how it is now, but traditionally in the summers, they have the best festivals, one after another. The comedy festival, the jazz festival. It's great.
Wait a minute. They got a comedy festival in Canada?
Yeah.
Isn't that like having a goddamn convention of hookers in a fucking virgin's home?
Well,
a comedy festival in Canada?
I thought you would say that about a jazz festival in Canada.
Well, I would actually say that about anything. I guess Montreal, they're a little more swinging and just.
Oh, it's a great city. You can get weed right on the streets.
Huh?
Nothing.
I didn't hear you.
I didn't say it.
Well, they're devil may care there because they're the French. Vive la resistance! You know where they came up with that, don't you?
At the Doubletree.
No.
Oh, where?
They goddamn in OVW. That's not fucking Rene Dupree. That's the only French thing that I knew from LeBeau on Hogan's Heroes. Vive la resistance! So he said it on TV and they made the team name La Resistance. Anyway. Oh, goddammit. All righty then. They did show a package of Roman Reigns and Rey Mysterio from SmackDown, and it looked better than anything on the show thus far in the night on Hell in a Cell. But anyway, then we get to the Charlotte and Rhea Ripley package. And they try to do these packages on every match, and as I mentioned before, sometimes they're good. They have a great studio, they have a great production team, but sometimes the story they got to tell is either incomprehensible or just goofy. But in this case, again, I like these girls because I believe these girls. That's the difference. They seem serious. They're pissed off at each other. It's a fight. They want to prove something to each other. They're not winking. How many other different ways can I say this in English words, Brian? Can you figure it out a different way that I can convey this? That I don't think these girls are phony. They just don't come off like they're being told to say these things. They come off more like they really believe it. Do you disagree with me? Am I alone in this?
No, these are two of my favorite women's wrestlers in the world. They both also look like athletes and look like wrestlers. And that's not to put down anyone else, but there are a lot of women who are fit, but tiny.
Yes.
There are a lot of smaller women. And I'm not saying, get out of the business, and maybe that's what you'll say, but I'm not saying that, but I'll
say it later on.
When you see Charlotte and Rhea Ripley, they look like athletes. They look like they should be there. And I think Charlotte and Rhea Ripley come across serious because they are serious. And they take, based on the way they are in the ring, you could tell they take it seriously. And they take a lot of pride out of their work.
And here's something. Charlotte, if you compare Charlotte to a Ric Flair, you can compare a Bayley to somebody like a Tully or an Arn in that they are not as genetically gifted with just the look and the physical charisma of a person standing there like Flair, but they actually were probably more solid workers especially with Tully, just a a guy that controlled the tempo and the pace and was always in the right place. And Bailey is that kind of old style heel that's always in control of the situation. She just doesn't look like the 6 foot tall, Charlotte Flair. Rhea Ripley has a completely different look, whereas Charlotte looks and carries herself like a star with the robes, but she's a classic, timeless wrestling heel persona of the great male heels. Because Flair, it wasn't just the nickname, the Nature Boy. Flair had charisma of the type, carried himself the type that Buddy Rogers did. That kind of stuff is timeless. Whereas Rhea Ripley looks and has the looks and charisma more of a modern babyface. She's got the fucking spikes and the punk rock and the whatever. She wouldn't look not good, but it wouldn't look right for her to come out wearing a long robe like Charlotte. That's not her look. That's not her gimmick, but you don't believe that they're just wearing these things and that they're just acting this way. They come off like those people. And also both girls are bigger than the referee. That's a plus there. But that's why that I think it's not about who can do a goddamn backwards triple Lindy off the top rope, or who, I'm sure Asuka can do a variety of wrestling holds that neither one of these girls would feel comfortable with. But I'm talking about to draw money on a big time basis. You need people who not only look like stars, but who come off like they are being themselves instead of someone that they are told to be. And that's why I like these two girls. And I like this match. I don't know if I like this match as much as last year's WrestleMania match when they had the best performance, because they were the only ones that didn't try to do bullshit that you should be doing in front of fans when they had no fans. They just concentrated on being athletic and letting you come in close and hear the grunts and the moans and the smacks. But they can work. It's not about the multitude of moves, and it's not about the it's inspiring, jaw-dropping, ballet-like accuracy of people diving off the top rope and going through cheerleading routines. They worked a contest, and they pay attention to the little things that mean something. Charlotte worked the best-looking chinlock that I've seen in ages. Just because she had Rhea Ripley's face out there where everybody could see it was getting smushed, but she was still tight around it. There were a few bobbles. At one time, Ripley was down on her knees, and Charlotte went to kick her, and I think Ripley turned the way that Charlotte wasn't supposing she was going to, and she whiffed it. But she covered up quick. She just started throwing kicks like she was frustrated, like, I'm gonna fucking kick at you till I get you. But they kept up the pace of a contest where shit made sense if one person was trying to beat the other one. Ripley threw a missile drop kick in, got her clover leaf, but Charlotte rolled through it. Charlotte did a moonsault and a backflip cover thing, but it made sense. She goes to moonsault and Ripley moves, but she lands on her feet and then backflips from there and nails her anyway. It was a counter. You can say Ripley sells well, not only with her facials, but just with her body language. She telegraphs some pain instead of just the standard by the numbers thing. They built to some false finishes. The big superplex that Ripley hit, she got a 2 count, but both of them sold it big. They weren't popping right back up. Ripley hits her the pump handle, the riptide. Charlotte gets the foot on the ropes, reminded me of Flair, and just the same way he'd do it right at the last second, which you can't do unless you know exactly where it is, and she did. Charlotte got the figure 4, and Ripley rolled, and they got the ropes. Both went on to the floor. Honestly, at that point, I was thinking that these two were on a step ahead of everybody on the show, male or female, so far that night. And all of a sudden, Ripley hits fucking Charlotte on the with the top of the announcer's desk, the sneeze guard or whatever it is, and the referee rings the bell. Out of nowhere, again, who's coming up with these finishes? These talents are having good matches, and then the finishes are just thrown out there like shit at a wall. And that, Brian, correct me, have we not seen somebody take the desk apart and hit somebody with it on almost every fucking program since we've been watching these things?
Every WWE program, yeah.
So when did it become, not saying it shouldn't be a disqualification, but if it's not going to be up until now, why was it here? If it was going to be a disqualification, you can't mean to tell me that somebody couldn't have given them a little bit more of a roller coaster ride first and a little bit more of a reason to do it. I think there ought to be more disqualifications when they're called for and when they're built to and when it leaves people wanting to see more rather than, oh, fuck, that just happened all of a sudden. Nobody does DQs properly anymore, but they help to further a program or to fucking confuse the issue in an angle or whatever the case. But you can't just do it like this. That was the most abrupt thing of the whole night, wasn't it?
I guess. I mean, the night was filled with abrupt things.
And then they kept fighting. After that, and Ripley left Charlotte down. But it was almost like it was so out of place that it was almost like one of those deals where the referee sees something and has no choice but to call it, even though that wasn't the real finish. And then they all just try to make up and then they wander off disgusted. But there were no foreign objects in this match. They didn't fight outside the ring. There was no gymnastics or cheerleading routines. They made it a contest. And I thought they had a really good match. And that was a lousy, cheap, abrupt finish. For what reason, I have no idea. Is it just that nobody remembers good DQs these days? It's been so long?
I don't think there's too much thought being put into how to do these things correctly. But they're both great. You know, this may be the match where I realize WWE's really now behind everyone. I watch baseball, stadiums packed with people. AEW has people. This is a match that needed people there. Not those monitors. At this point, WWE just feels like they're way behind everyone. It's still these monitors, this Thunderdome crap. I think they needed people there. I think Charlotte is great as always. I hadn't seen her in a little while. She appears to have lost weight. I don't think she needed to, but she was noticeably skinnier. But she's always great. Rhea Ripley's always great. They haven't had the classic match yet. That's what they need to do, but I think you need people there.
Yeah, they got to have people for that. And hopefully that, well, maybe SummerSlam, who knows what they're going to do. But you mentioned one thing. They're not trying, I'm not saying the talent, but whoever's doing these finishes or calling them, approving them or whatever, they're not trying. If you think about it, they don't have to. That is another byproduct of not having to, they don't have to sell live tickets to return matches anymore. They are still, they're going to go back to selling live tickets, but they're only going to be in a town once a year, if that. A huge market, maybe Chicago, they might twice a year. There's no return matches anymore. They don't care whether anybody buys the pay-per-views because I tried to and couldn't. Right? It's all about the streaming and the cock. There are no reasons to do. I mean, there's still the same reason there always is, because if you don't have disputed finishes and controversial finishes and quirky finishes and things to keep things fresh, then you have no wrestling promotion, because then you're just doing matches for no reason and nobody gives a shit. But so the reason has always been to hook people's attention and get them interested, and they want to see the rematch. They want to see the tag match that comes from the single match when the guys interfered. They want to see what's next and how it builds and where it finally pays off. That's the whole idea to watch this shit. But the promoters cared more about it and the bookers cared more about it in the days where they could financially and almost immediately see a difference. If their finishes weren't good, if their DQ didn't lead to the people wanting to see the no DQ match, or whatever, then by the next week, your gate was down. You could tell. And at least even then, 30 years ago, your pay-per-view buy rate sucked. So you could tell you're doing bad finishes that's not creating interest. You're not getting your talent over. People don't care about the program. Now they don't care about the fucking finishes because it's not going to affect their income at this point with guaranteed TV rights and fucking live gates are like, the cherry on the sundae. They don't give a shit whether anybody comes back. And they may give a shit, but it's not life and death. And life and death, in terms of whether you paid your bills or not, or stayed in business or not, or lived in a mansion or not, or had hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash secreted away for a rainy day or not, that's what kept all those promoters in business 52 weeks a year. And that's what kept them fucking thinking about different finishes and ways to do things to hook people and get them to come back again. And there's no necessity to that anymore. Anyway, I have gotten off the soapbox now after that, and we've come to our main event. And boy, oh boy, I will say I skipped 10 plus minutes from the last bit of Charlotte and Ripley, and the main event still was not in the fucking ring because I was ready for this to be over after I saw Charlotte and Rhea because I knew what this was going to be like, and it did not surprise me. And I like both these guys very much like Bobby Lashley, and I like Drew McIntyre as talents. I like Bobby Lashley as a person. I've met Drew McIntyre a couple times. He was a very fine person, used his left to right turn indicator, but he's not a personal friend of mine, but I like him as a talent. But God damn it. Now, we've already seen a cage match. We've already seen girls bashing each other with weapons. Now we're going to have the second cage match of the night for one of the world championships, but not actually the big one, because that's Roman Reigns, and we got bait and switched out of his match on this show. So already, why did they put these guys in this position? We've had girls in your gimmick doing shit that you'll probably be doing something similar to earlier on the show, and we teased that the biggest star in our company will be defending the number one title on this show, but we pull that off and put it on free TV so you guys close this thing. In the third time that we have seen you, at least in a major match, when Lashley has beaten you, Mr. McIntyre, flat in the middle, with really no excuse on the previous two occasions. I'm not envious of their spot here. Are you, Brian?
No, not at all.
Well, I just wanted to get you to chime in with that. They started on the floor and stayed there. And McIntyre beat Bobby Lashley all around ringside and bounced him off the cage. And then Lashley turned the tables and did the same thing. And then McIntyre hit him in the head with the steps twice. And then finally, after minutes, they get into the ring. Which is like if the German video started out with a rigorous fisting and ended up with sexy dancing. There was another kendo stick. Drew McIntyre got the kendo stick. Oops, girls did it. Not Simpsons, but the girls did it. And then McIntyre stops everything to set up a table on the outside of the ring. But Lashley was able to get MVP's cane in through the cage. And it's no DQ. Why? Lazy booking. Remember when you didn't have to say, really, that a cage was no disqualification because it was just assumed that there would be no weapons in the cage, and that's part of the thing about the cage. You couldn't get weapons or outside interference in, and you couldn't get out, so it was two guys hand to hand and bashing each other off the steel until one settled the issue with the other.
That's right.
So did they ever say, cage match, no disqualification? Maybe Bob Loose. Why are you, what are you going to, you couldn't throw the guy over the top rope and get disqualified because Cage wouldn't let you.
It was the same thing as saying cage match. Nobody gets in, nobody gets out.
Yes.
It's obvious.
And once again, another one of my brilliant ideas. Actually, it wasn't even my idea. It was just my suggestion for the first Hell in a Cell. I said, make the cage around the ring like that Lawler did in Memphis, where Savage could come off the top with the double sledge out to the floor and still do his shit. And you had some room to fight around the ring on a limited basis.
Who do you make that suggestion to?
Who did I?
Yeah.
Vince.
Well, he was receptive right off the bat?
Well,
because they had that one type of cage they used for, what, 10, 15 years?
Yes, and they sucked. The big blue cage that weighed 100,000 pounds.
Yeah.
And was expensive as fuck and would bust you open in a heartbeat if you looked at it sideways. Yes. We were discussing, and again, that was Undertaker and Michaels. It's going to be in a cage. That was the original thought, was a cage match. But it's a big pay-per-view, and we're trying to do things differently. And, the Attitude Era, Monday Night Wars, WCW. And especially since it was going to be the debut of Kane, and that was going to be Glenn Jacobs' big chance, and I like Glenn. I said, why don't we make it a bigger deal instead of just a cage match? And I even mentioned to Vince, I said, whether you know this or not, a large segment of the wrestling fans believes that the cage match should be no way in, no way out. And that's what they grew up on. I said, two things. Put the roof on it like the War Games, because that way people would know that there was no way to get in and no way to get out, right? Because that was good. To make the finish work where Kane appears, you have to have sold a situation where nobody can get in and nobody can get out. So it couldn't work for a standard WWF-style cage match. Put the roof on like the War Games, I said, and make the cage wider around the ring so they have room, because it's Michaels, right? So they have room to do their stuff like Lawler used to use in Memphis. And that way it's a bigger structure, and it's more, there's more sizzle to it than just the same old cage they've already seen. And of course I'm thinking about the War Game spots. They're building a dome of steel in Atlanta. Say you're going to see a structure like you've never seen before. Say it's the ultimate score settler, and that there's literally no way in and no way out for anybody unless the match comes to a conclusion, because then the whole idea of Kane coming out, well, how's he going to get in? When he rips the door off the impenetrable cage, that gets over. If he'd opened the door of a regular WWF-style cage match, the referees did that in every match multiple times, right? Wouldn't make a big fucking deal. So we changed the presentation in part specifically to make the finish more impactful. But then you also had a gimmick match that you could use ongoing, and then, of course, then you could overuse and then prostitute. And the first time I saw him where they had the fucking guy with the lever that lifts the cage and drops it from the ceiling and lifts it up on the payroll, I was like, well, they've fucked this one now too. But originally that was the idea for the Hell in a Cell, and that's where all those things came from. And as I've mentioned, I researched Kane ripping the door off the cage, which Vince liked. To answer your question, he liked these ideas because of the way that I just explained it to you. It made sense. And the Kane ripping the door off the cage was a reverse of Doug Furnas as a babyface doing that in Knoxville in Continental Wrestling when Kevin Sullivan was booking down there and introduced him as a hometown hero. He was the big babyface and came to the other babyface's rescue because the world's strongest man pulled the door off. Well, in this case, this fucking brother of the Undertaker and this evil supernatural motherfucker ripped the door off and dropped the Undertaker on his head. But anyway, now they got kendo sticks and fucking stairs, and back to McIntyre and Lashley. It's a hat on a hat. There's so many gimmicks, and they're on the floor constantly. And I know there's no fans in the building yet, but they're getting in the habit of doing this. A lot of fans, even in these major arenas where there's bleacher seating and where instead of you just being in a flat independent show floor with seats on the floor, you've actually got escalated seating where you can look down on the ring, but still, for the people who paid the most for tickets, They want to see most of the fucking match happen in the ring where they can see it if they're past the second row of ringside instead of on the other side of the ring on the fucking floor. They get pissed. They pulled another table from under the ring and started setting that up. And I wrote, why won't this end? They've been on the floor forever. McIntyre threw Bobby back in the ring and tossed in 3 chairs after him, but did not try to hit Bobby Lashley with any of them. He wedged one of them between the ropes and the turnbuckles, or tried to. I don't think they ever used that again, and he dropped Lashley face first on the other one. So, again, you're trying to beat this fucking big, giant, shoot-fighting monster, and you've got him going. So when you roll him in the ring, instead of grabbing one chair, since we've already established that this could be done and nobody do anything about it, and just walking in and just baseball batting him over the top of the head and caving his skull in and beating him, you throw 3 chairs in the ring, you set one of them in the ropes, and then you lay one of them down flat on the mat and fucking pick the fucking big giant monster you're fighting up and drop him on the chair instead of just hitting him with a goddamn chair. And then they went back to the floor. And they hit each other with the stairs. And I swear to God, I started getting sleep. I wrote, I'm getting sleepy. And they were on the floor for so long that I dozed off, Brian. And when I woke up, McIntyre was beating up MVP and trying to rip his clothes off or something. And I'm like, was he in the cage all along is what I'm thinking to myself. I found out later on he wasn't. But then Bobby Lashley got the full Nelson and they crashed through a table, which has never been done before in wrestling. And then they got back in the ring and used more chair shots. Like McIntyre hit Lashley 5 or 6 times with the chair. Boom, 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 boom across the back. And within seconds, Bobby's back up and chokeslammed McIntyre off the apron through another table that was sitting there sideways. And you didn't see the entire landing. So I'm calling shenanigans. And I wrote at that point, this will not stop. Why won't they let it stop? And then Drew McIntyre finally was going for his kick when MVP recovered from his ass kicking and grabbed his leg. And he turned around and Lashley rolled him up 1, 2, 3. That was a spot show finish when I broke in Tennessee. And they used it here on the pay-per-view, a cheap finish to an interminable match. And in the replays, I saw that during the point that I went to sleep because it was the same shit over and over for well over a half an hour, the referee got bumped and the other referee had to get in the cage to take over. And that's how MVP got in the cage and then got beat up and then forgot about so that he could come back and cause the distraction and the fucking chase the cat that ate the rat that lived in the cell that Vince built. What'd you think of this match?
I didn't hate it as much as you did. They worked hard. Every match on the show had a horrible finish, so why should this match be any different? I am relieved that the stipulation is that McIntyre can't get a match against Lashley for the title again.
Ever.
I'm kind of happy about that. I think I've seen enough of these two. I'm ready for them each to do something else.
And yeah, and
like Brock Lesnar.
There you go. And it needs to be Brock beats Drew and gets Lashley. And then we have Brock and Lashley.
Well, you see, that's the interesting thing. It's interesting you say that. I was thinking they would do it the other way.
No,
and it would be Lesnar.
Foolish.
It's WWE. Lesnar going after Lashley, and then they set it up so McIntyre gets his win over Lesnar again, this time with fans.
No. Have we ever seen Brock versus Drew McIntyre? Yes, we did, yes. Right?
That was the one time at WrestleMania,
yes.
No fans, and he lost the title.
Yes. Have we ever seen Drew McIntyre and Bobby Lashley?
Too many times recently, yes.
Have we ever seen Brock Lesnar and Bobby Lashley?
No.
Then we don't know what it's going to look like or how it might turn out. That means that's the match that's worth the most money. And I don't care because they beat Drew McIntyre on Raw with Randy Orton, whatever the fuck, last fall. They can do whatever. Brock comes back rematch from last year's WrestleMania. Thank you, Drew, but you're getting beat again because the winner of that, well, now they've said Drew can't get another title match, but at least he could stop Brock from doing it, whatever the fuck. You need to put fucking Brock over Drew and build. And can you imagine MVP and potentially Heyman?
Well, then that's the other question. Do you do Heyman with Lesnar, even though they've always been, well, not always, but for the last 10 years they've been together? Does that do anything to negatively affect him and Roman Reigns?
No, it doesn't, because Paul E. welcomes him back with open arms and announces that he has now got the two most powerful entities in the history of wrestling, or however they want to say it, without saying the word wrestling. And you've got Heyman in the corner of Brock, and you've got MVP in the corner of Lashley, and you've got a legitimate mixed martial arts style build with training and videos and those two guys talking and being serious. And in the meantime, Roman Reigns is well ensconced as the other champion, and you fucking don't do anything to fuck with that. And then, can you imagine what would happen if fucking Lashley defeated Brock Lesnar and then Paul threw Brock under the bus in some fashion that just mortally made him feel like he'd been anal raped? And then you've got Paul Heyman in the corner of Roman Reigns against Brock Lesnar, and who knows what the fuck you might spruce Brock up with. But you've got all kinds of combinations that you haven't seen before.
I agree. And if I was a betting man, I would put some money on that scenario you laid out, or maybe I shouldn't because it's WWE, but whether it's fantasy sports or anything else, of course, we could all do whatever we have to do with our friends at Stat Hero.
We can all have fantasies. You know, here's the thing, bro. It's fantastic having a fantasy. Here's the thing. As everybody knows, I do not follow a lot of professional sports closely. I think you will say this is a fair assessment. Basically, it's been wrestling and roller derby all my life, although the University of Louisville basketball team, and I, of course, was right in the corner of Muhammad Ali whenever he would fight. However, we do also, because of the surveys that we have done and the research that we've done, our vast audience out there, the cult of Cornette, they love sports. They love sports. They love betting on sports. They love fantasy sports. They love all these kind of things. It's just that we're a little slow on the uptake with them, but our fans need to be served. And that's why, folks, we're about to serve you. We're going to service your units because, Brian, I got this little factotum here, this little piece of information. Do you know that 85% of people who play daily fantasy sports lose?
Whoa, 85%?
85%.
I had no idea.
It's rigged. It's rigged against you. You're playing against thousands of these other lineups, and you're playing against experts. You don't stand a chance without somebody in your corner, without some help. Well, now with Stat Hero, the first ever daily fantasy sports book that puts the player in control and winning within their reach, they can take you to the top. Stat Hero shows you the lineups and dares you to beat them. It's you versus the house in a head-to-head fantasy matchup. You name your stakes, and winner take all. You've got the advantage because Stat Hero shows you their lineups ahead of time. Nobody does that. That's what I'm told. And with you in total control, you can play Stat Hero now and change the odds. So don't get killed by the daily fantasy sports experts. Don't play experts, play the house. Follow every play and player. Get the daily fantasy sports book that rewards passion with winning. And then write me and let me know what the fuck you've done and how happy you are about it. Folks, if you go to Stat Hero, that's S-T-A-T Hero, H-E-R-O, stathero.com/JCE. You sign up for free, and right now you can get 3 times back on your first play. They're giving you a 300% match. That is completely unheard of. I've not only not ever heard of it, I don't even know what it means now. But if you do, They're giving you a 300% match. Go to stathero.com/JCE right now and do these things that we have just talked about, and you'll be happier and live a life of religious freedom.
Well, Jim, let's go from one fantasy, in this case fantasy sports, to another.
Aldo Nova.
Which I guess is still technically fantasy sports, and that is the search for fantasy sports memorabilia that's captured each week on A&E.
Well, this was the season finale, and they another 2-hour extravaganza. I liked this in some ways even more. That the Andre search we mentioned was heartwarming and had a chance to fill in some of him as a person and a human being. This one was just an excuse to watch that great old footage and all the Mid-Atlantic stuff, the Carolina stuff. And they even had a few clips of the Mid-Atlantic films, 4th and 5th generation. They should have made the deal for my original films, and they could have redigitized those suckers. But anyway, I liked the way, obviously, as we saw at the conclusion, by the time the show was over, we know what they did again, but at least they did a better job of it this time in making it a search. They picked their items because they located them. And then they decided which ones would be the holy grails to search for. But they made it more of a mystery. They built it up at the start in the cold open in the early part of the program, like the Curse of Oak Island, right? We got to find this robe. Last seen in Johnson City, Tennessee. I can understand with some of the fine young ladies in Johnson City how Flair may have been distracted. But I loved the old footage, and it was great. Just the juxtaposition of him with the promo with, oh God, what was the announcer's name? Was that Big Bill Ward?
Big Bill Ward, yeah.
Big Bill Ward in Raleigh in 1974 with Rip Hawk. He's on film, then he's on videotape, then he's on DVD, and by the time modern day, he's a cultural icon with all the rappers. And you know, where I wonder, did they find the footage of Miss Olivia making the robes and being interviewed? Was that on a Florida program or a Georgia program sometime back that they would have in the library?
I am not exactly sure, but I did not think it would be either one of those two places that would have that. It seemed like it was something outside of wrestling, quite frankly.
And that's what I've never seen that footage. So I was, gratified that they found it somewhere. Anyway, they put a value on the Starrcade 83 robe at $50,000 and the Black Butterfly robe $70,000 to $90,000. Why couldn't they open up the valuations and the floodgates like that earlier in the series when poor Greg Valentine got $1,000 for his boots? Come on, show everybody else a little love. But basically, they went on the search for these. You saw later on, I don't want to give it away, but you saw later on how they found the Black Butterfly robe. So they built this show around the fact that some poor hotel worker in Johnson City had kept it all these years because Flair left it behind, and finally he needs money for his father's tombstone. And so he sold it on eBay, and I'm sure they had footage of them seeing that. This just sold on eBay for $10,000.
Yeah, that little fake scene.
I believe it sold for $10,000.
I believe that. And I believe they knew that before they started filming any of this.
Exactly. But anyway, on the search, at least we got to see Flair sit down with Darius Rucker. And he's a huge wrestling fan. We've mentioned this before. As a matter of fact, where the Mid-Atlantic film sets, they could have either got one from Flair or Darius Rucker because they both got a set that are in better quality than the stuff they were showing. But nevertheless, that's because they got it from the source. So did you like even though they kind of misidentified it, the footage of Flair training in the AWA and Vern's barn and all that stuff, but they showed him working with a couple of people as in training with Vern Gagne. Vern was not laying hands on Rick in that.
No. Training with Chris Taylor.
Shot. Yeah, and that was actually, I remember when Chris Taylor made his pro debut, he was so hot coming out of the 72 Olympics, him and Patera, they actually put Chris Taylor's debut pro wrestling match. And we talk about now how unfair it is to have a national TV debut. Chris Taylor's first pro match was in the AWA territory, and you're probably going to tell me what town it was here in a minute, against Mad Dog Vachon, and they taped the match and aired it on ABC's Wide World of Sports when it was one of the biggest network sports programs on television. And I watched it that afternoon, and it was cool, and Mad Dog actually fucking either potatoed or bit or bladed the bridge of Chris Taylor's nose so that he was really bleeding, and the announcers could say Chris Taylor is really bleeding from that nose wound. And Mad Dog's hopping around and everything, but at that time, Ric Flair was a young rookie that may or may not make it, and he was fodder in the class, and Chris Taylor and Ken Patera were the main focus, and Patera obviously became a star. Chris Taylor made it 2 years and quit the business and died of early death of his weight issues, and Flair became the biggest star in modern wrestling. So you never know.
Yeah,
anyway.
And they misidentified a bunch of footage. They even had him winning the Royal Rumble. They said WWF debut.
Yeah, that's another thing. They fudged on that because the Rumble robe and the Rumble boots and everything, but it was his WWE pay-per-view debut, right? It was a fudge there.
No, I don't even think it was that.
Was it not even that? Was he at Survivor Series the year before?
I think he did Survivor Series 91, yeah.
But anyway, so Darius Rucker, great guy, great wrestling fan. You could tell how much that shit meant to him. But then meanwhile, they've sent Rick's son-in-law, Conrad Thompson, out with AJ, and they go to his house. Charlotte just happened to be hanging around. She's in Huntsville regularly. But we know it was the wintertime because we'd see people's breath outside the house, and so this has been a while back. But that's where I've noticed again, when they showed the Charlotte highlights, she's got the same star look. She carries herself like somebody with the robe and the entrance as her dad did. And anyway, one collectible story that they didn't tell while they were at Conrad's house, they mentioned that he has the original big gold belt from 1986. They didn't tell the entire story of how he obtained it. Certain people's names may not be able to be uttered on a WWF program or WWE program, but it's amazing what 60 grand or so and a couple of shoe boxes in cash will do for you. Anyway, this is where it got complicated, because while Ric Flair is saying that he thought that Darius Rucker might have had the butterfly robe that he bought in a charity auction in the 90s, Conrad, who you would think that Conrad and Flair have passed some conversation, Conrad saying, I don't know where it is. I've been looking for it for years. So one would have thought they would have cross-referenced. But anyway, unfortunately, that was not the robe that Darius Rucker got. It was the white one. So anyway, now they go to North Carolina to West Potter while Ric Flair has lunch with David Crockett. I love this because it got a chance for them to reminisce and talk about the plane crash, and they had the plane crash segment. They didn't mention Tim Woods saving wrestling that day. You can only get that story in the graphic novel Behind the Curtain by Jim Cornette, available whenever JimCornette.com goes back on the air and live.
And they couldn't agree who messed up dinner. Was it Dusty or the accountant?
Yeah. But to ask David Crockett where that robe would have been was just, no, that was the cover story so they could tell the story of the plane crash, which was a great segment. I liked it. But David would not know where the goddamn robe was any more than anybody else. And I'm sure he hasn't given it any thought in the last 30 years. But they kind of beat around the bush and made a couple of jokes about Flair or a number of people in the Horsemen losing things. And I won't mention any names. I don't know who's still married to their significant others or whatever. But when the Horsemen were on the road, and this was, I've talked about the schedule, and Flair was a fucking freak of nature. We would all be on a flight somewhere from somewhere. We'd be back in coach at 7 o'clock in the morning, and everybody's like, oh, fuck it, I don't want to be on this plane. And Flair comes in a 3-piece suit, and he's got his brush, and he's brushing his hair in one fucking hand, and he's got the belt bag in the other hand and the suit bag over his shoulder. And he's, hey, guys, it's a great day. And he's sitting down in first class, and he's chatting up the stewardesses. But that was, if you flew from 7 to 10 in the morning, then you got somewhere, then you checked in, and then you probably went to work out if you were one of those guys, or if you were a regular human like me, you might have got a couple hours of sleep, and then you drive to the show, and then you're at the show at midnight, and you're coming back, you do it every day. With that kind of schedule, plus the extracurricular partying and after show activities that the Horsemen were involved in, they had to often have a suitable explanation for why they came home without a variety of their cash and valuables on certain occasions. So they would often try out these stories on the road, as it were, with the boys. And if the boys in the locker room were like, oh, shit, and had some sympathy, then it might pass by the wife at home or whatever, right? And if the boys were shooting the shit out of it, then you probably need to polish that story. I mean, one of the many people who were involved in the Horsemen, who shall remain nameless, his story for losing his, you remember the bank bags, right? That was before the fanny pack. Or is this a thing that people remember now about wrestling?
I think so. I mean, are you comparing it to the fanny pack? That's what's throwing me off a little bit.
In the 80s, guys weren't quite wearing fanny packs yet. The mid-80s, they had the bank bags first. This was a thing. In Louisiana, everybody had one. In Charlotte, for a while, guys had them. You know the zipper bank bag? It says Third National Bank, and it's a zipper, and businesses bring in cash in it, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, the bank bags.
Yeah.
Well, all the guys use bank bags for their fucking wallets because, for example, in Louisiana, the guys after promos on Wednesdays in Shreveport at Channel 3 would get their checks at interviews, and instead of, I would take mine and take it back to Alexandria where I was living and deposit it in my checking account, but all the guys, because they were making these size checks and they just wanted to see the money, in the couple hours you had between the time interviews were over and the time you went to TV that night at the Irish McNeil Boys Club, or on your way out of town to a spot show if it wasn't TV night, they'd go to the fucking bank near the TV station that dealt with Mid-South Wrestling and all the wrestlers, and they'd cash their checks. And they would have $3,000-$4,000 in cash. This was 1984, stuck in this bank bag along with their driver's license, if anybody had a credit card. You remember the jewelry was a big thing back then, where guys were getting those big gold bracelets and big gold chains with the gold double eagle $20 bill in them, and just thousands of dollars. Dr. Death Steve Williams had a watch that I could have worn for a fucking belt. It was all gold and jewels and these. Anyway, they'd have all this jewelry and shit. They'd have $10,000 worth of shit in their bank bag. And I'm like, what the fuck? But it was a status thing, and who's going to take it away from them, right? Who's going to say, hey, come here, Hercules Hernandez, I need your fucking bank bag. But guys would get inebriated or get hurried or get, whatever in a rush, and sometimes they'd get left behind. So one time anyway, one of the Horsemen, his story for losing his bank bag with his driver's license, a lot of cash, and a couple of pieces of jewelry was that he had worked out at the hotel gym and then had gone in the bathroom and was sitting there with his pants around his ankles taking a shit, and his bank bag was sitting there, and a hand came from the next stall and took it and ran off. By the time he could get his pants up and everything, it was too late. That was a story that they said, okay, we'll go with that. But a lot of you getting up early in the morning, it's before daylight. You're in an unfamiliar hotel room every night, and you leave a bag, especially if you put it. I always do what I call a stupid check. And I've been doing that for 30 years. Every time I leave a hotel room, I look in every place that anything of mine could conceivably be. But sometimes, let's say your fucking ring outfit was dirty, so you washed it out but you couldn't hang it on the shower curtain rod where you usually hang it because there's one of those weird fucking shower curtain rods. So you put it on the back of the goddamn bathroom door, but then you leave the bathroom door open and you don't realize it's hanging on the back and it's gone. So anyway, these things happen.
How many times did it happen to you? Over 35 years, how many times did you leave a bag or leave something in a hotel room?
I can tell you one night in Albany, in Albany, New York, after a Raw, I got in the car and drove almost all the way back home to Connecticut and realized 30 miles from home I had left my briefcase. And the reason I left my briefcase is because they did a locker room shoot and moved my briefcase from where it was sitting next to my fucking suit bag and some other kind of carry-on bag to dress the set and didn't move it back. And luckily, believe it or not, of all people, Jake the Snake Roberts, I knew had stayed overnight at a hotel, and I was able, when I got home, to call him at that hotel and he got somebody to run back over, because they were still tearing down, to run back over to the fucking building and get it. I left, God damn it, one of the All Japan, one of the warm-up suits. Remember the Capital Sports warm-up suits?
Oh, yeah, those are awesome. Those are the best.
Bobby Fulton brought me one back, and I still have it, but he brought me one back that fit even better the second time, but I left the goddamn jacket in a locker in a show in the Carolinas somewhere. I've never lost a bag or a wallet. I'm, as you can imagine, a little anal about things like that. I've always kept track of my shit. I've only locked my keys in my car one time in my life. I've never lost my wallet. It was misdirected one time, and more on that later, in a bag, but it came back to me the next day. But still, shit like that happens every so often. Anyway, back to this program.
Yeah, maybe more often if you're Ric Flair.
Well, yeah, because obviously it was a lot harder road schedule, and there were other, lack of sleep and alcohol and etc. They did an emotional segment about Reed, and this is really it. When you think about this, Charlotte was never going to be a wrestler. Reed and David both wanted to be wrestlers and follow in their father's footsteps. And David was at OVW for a while, and WCW, it wasn't a natural thing to him. Reed looked like he was probably going to be better as a pro, didn't get the opportunity. But between both of Rick's sons and his daughter, the one offspring that didn't want to be a wrestler turned out, because she was a great athlete. And I mean, she'd been a tremendous athlete from the time she was a kid in school. But she's the most natural worker of the family. And she ends up being the second generation star. There's a trivia question for you, or a stumper or whatever. When has ever the offspring of a famous wrestler, the daughter, been more talented in the ring than the sons? Get back to me.
Luna Vachon.
Well, wait a minute now. There were no sons. Did I catch you in a loophole?
I'm trying to think who had a daughter and a son. I mean, that's what I'm trying to think of now. That worked.
There were no Vachon sons that got in wrestling.
Baby Doll didn't have a working brother.
Nope.
Who had a son and a daughter that wrestled? Well, I'm not going to name one of them. We just fucking talked about on Dark Side of the Ring. But
okay, yeah. Well,
yeah. Other than that,
but there you go. But anyway, this is a unique situation. Old Wes Potter in North Carolina has some of those great old Carolinas posters, and they showed the Flair and race footage. Thank God they edited out where Gene Kiniski was a great wrestling champion, but God, he was a horrible referee and botched that Starrcade finish bad.
Hey, they made that match look fantastic in clip form. Go watch that match. I've said it before. Yeah. There are people who are sick of me saying it. I don't care. The worst match. Flair and race at Starrcade 83. For all that build-up, that match to me was so dry, and the crossbody was bizarre, and Kiniski was the worst guest referee of all time. But it looks great in clips.
Yeah, in highlights, it looks great. No, that was and I've seen Ric Flair and Harley Race have great matches. That was not amongst them. That was the worst Flair Race match of all time and the biggest showcase. But anyway, and part of it was timing issues, and part of it was rushing, and part of it was Kaniski, and part of it blah, blah, blah. But anyway. But however, Wes Potter, funnily enough, has the Starcade robe, but doesn't know where the butterfly robe is, but he's also got the Rumble boots. So now we start dickering around. Old AJ offers $60,000 for the boots and the robe, but he won't sell. But when Charlotte asked him to loan them for a period of time, when have they broken ground on the Hall of Fame? Is this like, okay, in 5 years down the road, we're going to ask to borrow these for a period of time? But anyway, he said okay to that. They showed footage.
This is the episode that AJ started pissing me off. Just the whole, the person has no interest in selling. All right, here's what we're going to offer you. And it's always some bullshit offer. And I always feel bad. I mean, we'll talk about it later. I felt so bad for Charles Robinson watching this thing. Leave the man alone. Get out of his house.
Give him some peace.
Flair knew it was wrong. He had to leave the room. He knew this guilt trip was wrong. This poor referee has this. It means something to him. Get the fuck out of his house, AJ.
Well, we're getting ahead of ourselves here.
At one point, AJ talking about that robe, he goes, and that's the robe that Ric Flair wore in the iconic photo. What iconic photo? I can't think of what iconic photo he wore that photo in. Tell me which one, AJ. Wrestling historian AJ. Wrestling collector AJ. But anyway, I'll go back to you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. That's a safe shot every time, however. But one of the shots that they showed of Rick with celebrities was Rick and Burt Reynolds. And I don't know what they were talking about, but they had a mutual friend because Barry Windham's girlfriend at the time, and I think her name was Pam.
That's right.
Okay, you remember that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like that Barry was bringing his girlfriend to the matches all the time, so I wasn't, closely acquainted. But he brings this young lady to the trip we made to, oh God, it wasn't Las Vegas, so it was St. Martin, the NWA meeting that Crockett took all the top guys. He flew them all down to St. Martin when he was the last vestige of the NWA, and he wrote it off, but he gave the guys a 3 or 4 day vacation. And Barry Windham brought Pam because that's who he was seeing at the time. And the biggest thing I remember out of her is I never saw the poor girl sit down one time that weekend because the dresses that she was wearing were so tight she couldn't even bend at the waist. Amazing shape.
Pam Seals.
And son of a gun, wouldn't you know who won the pony? Not to try to knock Pam as saying she looked anything like a pony. She was a thoroughbred. But I look on TV a few years later on one of these Access Hollywood shows or whatever, and Burt Reynolds' girlfriend is Pam from St. Martin that came down with Wyndham. Anyway, I did not know that Ric Flair was in a Bugs Bunny video. But apparently not only is Bugs a big fan, but also he had Rick in some of his videos. And they showed all the NFL and the NBA guys strutting and imitating Flair. And then Flair asked Bunny where the robe was. And Bunny didn't look like he knew where his goddamn next meal was coming from, even though he's a multimillionaire. He didn't look like he would be keeping track of Ric Flair's robes from 25 years ago.
Hey, say what you want. We've seen a lot of celebrities do things with wrestling. You may not like his music. He seems respectful.
He's a nice guy. Yeah, he is. You can tell this really means a lot to him.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna give him a break from now on.
Did you see that interview he did? It was like I think on HBO. It was like him, LeBron James, Jay-Z, like several major celebrities just sitting around talking. And one of them asked him about wrestling, and he said, "It's real. It's the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yeah,
just the simplest bumps on the first day kill you." He was very respectful. I got a lot of respect for him. The way he's treated wrestling.
If he just start doing some Skinnerd. Just sing some Skinnerd, man. Anyway, so about now here in the program, they find the breaking news that some guy sold it for $10,000 on eBay. But obviously the buyer's name is not out there publicly. So they call Conrad, and he knows. And basically, that was the story. The hotel guy sold it to pay for his father's tombstone. But the buyer, the guy who bought it, didn't want publicity and sent somebody else to Richmond, Virginia to negotiate and haggle over it. And I say they've got a great production crew. Well, actually, this is an A&E production. It wasn't the WWE crew, but a little tip, folks, when you're shooting people riding in a car like AJ and Ric Flair were, and when AJ speaks, the camera's on him and he's driving 60 miles an hour. But when Flair reacts to what the guy just said and the camera's on him and they're completely stopped, that's called a jump cut. And you might not want to do that anymore. It looked like they just ran into a wall suddenly. They did a segment on Flair versus Jim Herd. I will never get tired of seeing Jim Herd buried in any forum, especially national television. And I can testify that Rick was kind in his assessment of everything he said about he hated Jim Herd probably worse than I did, if that is a thing you can wrap your head around.
You know what's crazy? It's such a long time ago. It really is. Other than Jim Barnett, everyone is alive. You, Kevin,
okay.
Rick, Herd,
yeah,
Juster,
yeah,
Jim Ross,
yeah,
Jody Hamilton,
yeah,
Ole,
yeah.
Everyone who was involved in the behind the scenes of WCW at that time is still with us. It's kind of crazy. It's a long time ago.
And you've never heard any of those people say anything good about Jim Herd.
Except Jim Herd.
Anyway, so they met Rick Rosenberg, if that is indeed his real name. He was the negotiator on the owner's behalf, and he looked like a slimy little pissant. And basically, they offer $50,000 for a robe that they've said the value is 70 to 90, but the guy paid 10. So that's when the guy instead, he wants to trade. He wants the jungle robe and Ric Flair's boots in trade for the butterfly robe. And so Conrad says, I'll throw the boots in, but Charles Robinson has the jungle robe. And there's where you alluded. They go to Charlotte. Poor Charles Robinson, nicest guy in the world. And he's got great Carolinas posters also. He's got the jungle robe. And obviously Rick knew that because he got it from Rick. And Charles wants to be buried in the jungle robe. And they're trying to fucking strong arm him out of it, right? And that's when poor little Nate breaks down crying. Rick has to hug him. So then they
Rick
go
leaves.
back.
Rick has to leave
Yes,
the
he has
room.
to walk out of the room.
He knows this is wrong. He knows. This is completely wrong. This guy loves you. Rick named like 4 different people on this show as his biggest fan. And
yeah.
Charles Robinson was one of them. This guy's my biggest fan. So let me leave him in a room alone with AJ.
But it was all, in the end, it worked out because I never liked the jungle robe as much as the gold robe, which is an Olivia robe that Ben Brown, the archivist, arranged to trade to Charles so they could take the jungle robe, and he got the gold one. The gold one's cooler anyway. But anyway, so they go back to the guy with the jungle robe and the boots, and now the guy wants $25,000 thrown in. And then they all huddle up. And since the billion-dollar publicly traded company is apparently on a strict budget, Conrad's going to kick in the $25,000 and the boots. And then they're going to put that together with the jungle robe to co-buy the butterfly robe. So they meet at a restaurant somewhere, which I guess is better than a Home Depot parking lot with $60,000 in shoe boxes. And when now the guy wants more cash. He wants the jungle robe, the boots, and $50,000. Or no, he wants more cash. They offer 50 and he wants 60. And this is where I immediately knew it was a complete work because Flair would have told him to fuck off. By that point, this guy keeps changing this deal. But so finally they did it, and the most expensive robe in the history of robes is now somewhere under their control. I love the old footage.
Yeah, could have used some more of it.
Could have used some more of the old footage in place of almost all the new footage, except for Charles Robinson. I'm glad to Charles Robinson on TV, Lance Russell on TV here lately. We're seeing some of our old friends we haven't seen in a while.
That's right.
And that's all I got to say about that.
Well, that was the Ric Flair episode of Most Wanted Treasures. I guess the last episode, at least of the season. Do we know for sure if they're bringing the show back?
I would have to think everything that they have done.
What else are they going to look for?
Well, no, but I mean, everything they've done on the classic wrestlers has been a rating success and has, in a lot of cases, outrated the modern wrestling programs themselves. So I would have to think that they're going to do more biographies, more, even if it's not the exact same show. I would think that this has gotten A&E some numbers that they have not gotten with every single bit of their programming. So they're going to want to do some more stuff. And I don't blame them because, again, why do you think our show is so successful? Because there's a lot of people who used to like wrestling that don't anymore, that still want to hear about the people that they liked and the shit they liked. They just can't stand to look at the modern stuff. So if you tell these people, yeah, we're going to have a biography on this great wrestler or that big star of the 80s, 90s, or whatever, people know who they are and they want to see it. And they know they won't have to watch kids tumbling.
Well, you know, Jim, one thing Ric Flair was always known for, and you saw a little bit of it in some of those archival clips, was what great shape he was in, the cardio.
Oh,
he was known for being on that Stairmaster almost as much as he was known for being on some of those people at the Marriott. But
hey, wait a minute now. He got his cardio in a variety of ways. But yes, Flair had a fully equipped gym in his house. Flair would start out the day with an hour on the Stairmaster. He was a machine. He was just a beast.
Well, if he was listening right now, I would say, hey, Rick, what about Echelon?
Boy, we would have some news for him. And I would be surprised if even right now, at the age of 72 or whatever the case, if Ric Flair is not all over this. Have you heard about the folks at Echelon? They're in the upper echelon. It's ECHELON, by the way. And basically, they have a fully equipped service where they can bring the gym home to you. If you've always wanted to get in shape, but you don't have time to get to the gym, they bring the gym home. They've got workout equipment, a workout community, and instructors' motivation right in the comfort of your own home. And Brian, you've seen some of the many items and the full range of affordable workout equipment that they've got, the stationary bikes, the smart rowers, the sleek fitness screens, the auto-folding treadmill, but it's all connected with the Echelon experience, which is around-the-clock classes for the entire family, full-body workout programs. One membership can cover a family of 5, and apparently, the way that I'm understanding this modern technology is, you get this equipment, you put it in, they've got a fitness app, and you can go into these classes, listen to great music, and you can basically cheer each other on and co-intermingle with the other people exercising on these various pieces of equipment in the privacy of their own homes. Is that basically correct?
Basically, correct.
Basically, I didn't mean to give just every minute goddamn detail, but it's a fitness experience is what it is.
That's right.
Just like the Jim Cornette experience. And right now, folks, on either the experience or the drive-thru fans, you all are our fans and our listeners, and you can get a special offer. I forgot what show it was. You get a special offer right now for a limited time only. Start your 30-day risk-free trial offer with Echelon's EX3 exercise bike for just $1. A risk-free offer. Try it out for 30 days. Echelon's EX3 bike for $1 and free shipping. The only way to get this offer is go to echelonfit.com. We mentioned it. ECHELON. echelonfit.com/drive. echelonfit.com/drive. The Echelon EX3 bike 30-day free risk offer, or risk-free offer. It's a free risk offer and a risk-free offer for only $1. You can get all the information at echelonfit.com and be sure to use the / of drive. And you can, I mean, it's too late for me. Let's face it. I get blown up jogging my memory.
No, it's never too late for you. I think you are the perfect spokesman, though, for Echelon, considering that phrase early on in the copy. Echelon brings the gym home.
Yes, in the comfort of your own home. And that's where I spend the majority of my time. But
there'd be a whole bunch of commercials, though, with you on random doorsteps. Bring the gym home.
Yes.
Not this gym, this gym.
Any gym that you like, just bring him home. Well, let's bring this spot home. There you have it. echelonfit.com / drive, folks. Join the community of 25,000 members in this Echelon business who can give you that extra push in your workout.
All right. Well, let's get an extra push in this here drive-through.
Well, I figured you'd be pushing me as quickly as possible.
I'm going to give you a choice. We can go right to questions, and we have a lot of them, and there's a lot of things happening in wrestling that people want to hear what you want to say about. Did that make any sense? I don't know. However, I will move on, and I will continue with what I was saying, and I will say that the other option is, if you wanted to, we could play a little guest the program. I don't know if you think we've done it too much, because we did it on both shows last week.
I'm having a ball doing it.
So you want to do it?
So I think we should do a little bit more of it.
This first one here, I just got. I want to thank the person in a moment, but first let me go to the card. See if you can guess this. The opening match, Enrique Torres versus Mike Paducas. The second match, Billy Two Rivers versus Rocco Perez.
Ooh.
The third match, tag team match, as it says here, 4 colored girls, Ethel Johnson and Betty White versus Babs Swingo.
No, it's Babs Wingo. They put an extra S in.
Oh, it says Babs Swingo.
Yeah, it's Babs Wingo. She was sisters with Ethel Johnson.
And Marva Scott. The next match, another tag team match, George Becker, who seems to always be on these shows, and Mike Clancy versus Al and John Smith. 2 more matches, Paul Anderson versus Hans Schnabel. And the main event... Schnabel. The main event, The Great Bolo versus Larry Crusher Hamilton.
We are in the mid-50s. And it almost seems like we would have to be in the Carolinas or somewhere on the East Coast. And God damn. I'm just going to go with 1953 in either the state of North Carolina or Virginia.
The date, January 26th, 1959.
Oh!
The Charlotte Coliseum.
Okay.
Promoter Jim Crockett. And I want to give a special thanks to a friend of mine who I owe a phone call to, Frank the Collector.
Oh.
Who notified me about this, and I immediately swooped in and purchased it. It's a series of 3 programs from 59. This one is autographed by George Becker, Ethel Johnson, Big Bill Ward, Enrique Torres, the Smiths. Yeah, Paul Anderson.
Al and John Smith, they were bearded. They had the gimmick from the Smith Brothers cough drops. The reason why I got the year all wrong is I would have sworn that the girls' tag match would have been earlier. That's what threw me off to the early 50s, because I didn't know they were still working in that combination that late.
Well, speaking of earlier, let's go a bit earlier with this next one. On the cover of the program, coming back next week, Jumping Joe Savaldi.
How can we miss you if you won't go away?
The card, the first bout, Kay Bell versus George Becker, again. Kay Bell is filling in for General O'Brien, who was not there. The second bout, and now I never know how to pronounce this guy's name. Hopefully you do. King Kong Kashi?
Yeah, Abe King Kong Cashy.
Cashy, there's so much stuff of him floating around, versus Paul Bosch, who is filling in for Sergeant Johnny O'Brien, who also no-showed. 2 O'Briens no-showed. Then Big Ben Morgan, who's filling in for Kila Shikuma from Japan, who I'm not familiar with, versus Tom Zaharias. 2 final matches, semifinal.
Wait a minute. Tom. There was George and there was Chris. I don't remember Tom.
This is Tom Zaharias. The semifinal, 2 out of 3 falls.
Of course, it's like George Liberace.
2 out of 3 falls. Ivan Rasputin versus Sandor Szabo. And the main event, Bronco Nagurski versus Public Enemy. Who it says here in the handwriting, because all the results and times are marked in here, it says Frank Cutler changes name every so often. So that's Public Enemy, apparently.
My God, this is definitely during the World War II years. Would that be?
I'll give you a heads up. No, this is not during the World War II year.
It is immediately afterwards.
No, that's wrong too.
What? It's not before World War II.
It is indeed before World War II.
It is indeed before World War II. Son of a bitch, is it in the Northeast?
It is not.
Okay.
Now, why did you think Northeast? Was it Bosch?
Well, I was thinking Bosch because Becker also worked. George Becker worked the Carolinas. He was the top babyface and later on the Booker for 30 years, from the 40s through the 70s. But he worked a lot in New York at that time. As hearing Bosch, knew he worked there. Nagurski could have been anywhere because he was a big name. Sandor Szabo was a big name as well. The rest, goddamn, okay. Then fuck it. I'm going to stay out of the Northeast, and I'm going to say that this was in 1939, and this was in California or Texas.
The date, Wednesday, May 25th, 1938.
Ooh.
Portland Auditorium.
Son of a gun. Portland, Oregon. All right. I bombed on that one completely.
Joseph, and the girls are coming. Joseph Aldi on the front cover of the back says, the girls are coming.
The girls are coming.
For more than 2 years, we have been trying to get the Portland Boxing Commission and the City Commission to place an okay on a championship wrestling bout between Clara Mortensen, World Lady Champion, and one of the 3 contenders for the title available at Hollywood. But it's always been thumbs down. Once we had a petition with 2,200 names on it asking that girls be allowed to wrestle in Portland. But no go. However, Portland Mat fans are finally going to get a chance to see this fine girl athlete, Miss Mortensen, in action. Her Portland date is June 8th, and the bout will positively be held, and it won't be a private exhibition either. The location of the bout, the time, and the contestants will be announced within the next 10 days. And now this is all in caps. But I'll guarantee one thing, the girls will appear here. And apparently, listen to this, Clara Mortensen drew 8,000 fans in Seattle the last time she wrestled there. She drew 7,000 fans in Vancouver. In Los Angeles, she sold out the Hollywood Stadium and the Olympic Auditorium. And at San Francisco, she drew 10,000 people. Her hometown is Portland, and then it goes on a little bit about her, but
she was the world women's champion directly before Mildred Burke. And it was a spotty situation where, I mean, she wasn't being booked on a regular basis all over the country because it was still on a case where she could actually legally appear, etc. But the answer to the trivia question, was there a famous girl wrestler before Mildred Burke? The answer is yes, Clara Mortensen.
All right, Jim, this next one could be a little tricky, or you could get it right away.
Oh, boy.
The opening match, Joe Scarpa versus Evan Marion. The second match, Pedro Godoy versus Judo Jack Terry. The third bout, Eduardo and Louis Martinez versus Tojo Yamamoto and Taro Miyake.
Taro Miyake.
And finally, the main event, 2 out of 3 falls, 1 hour time limit. Kurt and Carl von Bronner versus Haystacks Calhoun and Dickie Steinborn.
We are in the Goulas territory, aren't we? Or are we in Georgia?
No and no.
No? God damn it.
And
all
no.
right. Then could we be in Florida?
Yes, I was actually about to say technically Goulas did have a different territory at one point, or an expanded territory, and it was Florida.
This would have been in the era of 1961 through 5. I betcha. And I'm going to say Tampa 1962.
The date, Friday, January 19th, 1962.
Oh!
Miami Beach.
Ah! All right. 200 miles off.
200 miles off. This next one is really tricky, I think, but you may get it right away.
You keep saying that.
Now, this one, well, listen to this card. The opening bout, Mario Galento versus Ivan Robert. The second event, The Great Malenko and John Smith versus Tom Drake and Don Fields. The main event, 1 hour time limit, Billy Wicks versus Sputnik Monroe.
Well, see, now you throw me off because I was about to say Birmingham, but now I want to bring it back to Memphis. You dastardly villain, but that's not a Memphis card. Maybe not. What?
I did say it could be a bit tricky. I didn't think this would be just an obvious. I'm not going to just give you an obvious one like that.
Yeah. It's not Memphis, but one would think because Billy Wicks and Sputnik Monroe is the main event, it would be. That's the trick. That's what you're saying?
Yeah.
So I'm going to go back to Birmingham, Alabama. And I'm going to say 1959 or 1960.
Mobile, Alabama.
Son of a bitch.
Ladd Stadium, Wednesday, July 9th, 1958.
Okay.
So a year before everything in Memphis.
Sputnik was in Alabama the year before he was in Memphis. So I got the state, didn't get the city, and I was a year off on the year.
That's right. That is correct.
One more.
Let me
one more chance.
Let me see if this one has a lineup in it, this program. Okay. The opening match, Jim Grabmeyer versus Carl Campbell. The second match, Johnny Barend versus Ali Pasha. The third match, Oscar Verdue, of course, Crusher Verdue, versus Bearcat Wright. And the main event, the Iron Russians versus Nature Boy Rogers and Sweet Daddy Siki, 2 falls to win.
We're in... The year is going to be 1961? 61? I'm not taking my finger off the checker yet. And it's going to be in the Great Lakes region.
Let me just say, I don't have, now that I look, an exact date other than the month and the year. I don't have the actual date.
Okay, well, I'm not going to get fucking March 31st or whatever, but let's go with 1961 in western New York State?
August 1959. Bobby Davis presents All-Star Wrestling, the Fairgrounds Coliseum, Marion, Ohio.
Son of a bitch. Okay, when Bobby Davis got the opportunity to be a promoter around the Columbus area and the state of Ohio, and Rogers was helping him. And that explains Johnny Barron, and that explains Rogers, and Siki and Bearcat Wright was just around at the time, but it was a spot show, which is why there's only 4 matches. And who are the Iron Russians?
I'm going to look through the program here. There's a couple masked figures on the back. Here's Bearcat Wright. That's a disturbing photo. I don't know who this is. This must be Ali Pasha. I do not see anything. Don Lewin has returned to our area after a long absence, as also Johnny Barren. That's a weird way of putting it. Next Saturday, August 15th, is the biggest wrestling show at the Fairgrounds Coliseum in Marion, Ohio. Nature Boy Rogers, yeah, that's building up this one actually right here. This is an issue of Buckeye News, Buckeye Matt News. And that's
you know, Bobby Fulton is from right down the road in Chillicothe, Ohio, and it's a Buckeye state. The Ohio thing is the Buckeyes, right? And Bobby Fulton, when I had a issue a couple of years ago with hemorrhoids, Bobby Fulton said, "Now this will work, Jimmy." He gave me a Buckeye. And he said, "This will take care of your hemorrhoids." I said, "You mean I have to shove that thing up my ass?" And he said, "No, you just carry it in your bag, and it's like a lucky charm." And son of a gun, I've had no more issues since I got that lucky Buckeye. Once I figured out how to get it out of my ass before I talked to Bobby, but after that, I've had no more issues.
Well, speaking of issues, some people may have heard your performance and guessed the program today and thought, I thought this man's supposed to know wrestling history. I thought this man's a wrestling historian. I've been duped. I've been conned.
Hornswoggled, swindled, bamboozled, flim-flammed even.
That's right. I'm just
helping you there.
I didn't know you were going to stop. I thought you were going to keep going.
I can.
Perhaps they've been listening under false pretenses. And they want action.
They've been led down the primrose path and misrepresented and lied to, and now they need some relief from somebody. Well, I know the man.
Call Stephen P. News. If you need to sue. An outlaw mud show or two. Those are the rest.
Yes, folks, I would have built that up even longer, but you knew where I was going, so we just got right to it. Folks, Stephen P. New, the man for you, the consigliere of the cult of Cornette, is the man that you need to turn to if you have any legal ramifications or perspicacity that you need taken care of. Just look that word up. It doesn't have any resemblance to the way I just used it. Stephen P. New at newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084 is the man to turn to when you need compensation, when you need some relief. Just shoot up here amongst us, because one of us needs some relief. And I'll tell you what, not only has he gotten millions of dollars in these settlements, the Veterans Administration Hospital where the doctor sexually abused his patients, or the city of Minden, West Virginia, where the groundwater was poisoned by deadly chemicals, or with the 3M earplugs, that the defective earplugs that our service members were given. But those are big multi-million-dollar lawsuits. But this is the kind of guy Stephen P. New is. He's flying around on a jet plane. He's doing multi-million-dollar settlements. But the happiest that he was made this past week or two by a new judgment was only for $50,000 for his client, but it meant more to him than all these other ones, because this was a nice old lady that was involved in an accident through no fault of her own, had like $7,000 in doctor bills, and State Farm, who was not a good neighbor, took phony information from somebody else and would not give this lady her compensation. And Stephen P. New took over the case from her previous attorney and didn't just get her $7,000, got her $50,000 for her time and suffering and effort and being bothered with all of that. So whether it's if you think nobody owes me $16 million, but by God, somebody owes me 50 grand, you can still call on Stephen P. New. And he's also the title sponsor of the big event at the Raleigh County Civic Center in Beckley, West Virginia this August, the Bash in Beckley. And newlawoffice.com is an official sponsor there also. So anyway, Stephen P. New is the man for you. 1-888, not even the one, just 888-692-8084, newlawoffice.com. Go on the website and look at all the various cases they've handled. They're getting more people paid than Las Vegas these days.
That's right.
All right, what else you got there, pal?
Well, we got a bunch of questions. A lot of people have been curious about a lot of things. There's a lot of things happening in and around the world of wrestling, and of course in and around the world of Jim Cornette. Jim, several questions have come in. I'm going to assume you saw it, but I'll ask you one of the questions in a moment. But let me ask you if you have. Did you see Chris Jericho's recent comments about you?
I did not when they originally took place, but a few people sent them after the fact, and we were all getting a good giggle out of them. But you can prep the people for those of you who aren't up on things.
Well, I'll read this question sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Cam Domaski in Westmoreland County, Western Pennsylvania.
Oh, we're supposed to believe that name?
There's nothing wrong with that name. It sounds legitimate.
What?
Cam Domaski?
All right, if you say so. Don't ask me about Domaski.
You have a problem with Cam or Domaski?
I'm not sure whether Cam goes with Domaski.
Cameron.
Well, then why didn't he say it that way?
Well, I mean, I'm assuming.
Cameron Domaski.
I'm assuming it's short for
sounds
Cameron.
a little more palatable, a little more upscale than Cam Domaski.
There's nothing that seems illegitimate about this man or his email, but let's ask his question
What's
here.
his question?
Hello, Jim and Brian. Chris Jericho is back at it again after a fan commented this on an AEW Instagram post, which he attached here. I'll read you that in a moment. About the cage match between Wardlow and Jake Hager. Chris Jericho responded, I'd like to ask Jim about his thoughts on this and if he thinks Jericho or other people in AEW or on the roster still listen to his podcast. And here is, we don't see all of everything in this screen capture here, but I guess it was a clip of the Wardlow-Jake Hager MMA match, which a lot of people hated and a lot of people liked. It really split people down the middle. Someone posted it and someone responded, the best thing about this, Cornette will have a field day on his podcast. I can't wait. Ha ha ha.
Yes. Just a fan exercising his right to free speech, giving his opinion, right?
To which the verified account of Chris Jericho Fozzy replied, wow, really? Who the fuck cares what Cornette thinks? Dude hasn't been relevant since the 90s, and he got fired from the last mainstream gig he had a few years ago for making racist remarks. So, I'm asking you, are you a racist? And I do want to add to this because the next reply is actually pretty great. Another person jumps in and replies, your wife and mom-in-law were at the Capitol on January 6th. Fuck all the way off with your bullshit excuse of a run in AEW and your donations to Trump. You're more racist than Corny can ever be, Junior. But Jim, that is the question from Cam, and this is the actual quote as was written from the verified account of Chris Jericho.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on this?
I think he's melting down, and I think it's driving him crazy that I will not stop calling attention to the things that they do on national television every week, and it's driving him up the wall. And Chris, I haven't been relevant since the 90s when I discovered his ass. Maybe that's the last good thing that I did in his mind. I don't know why that he would say that since I was relevant enough that, what was it? Was it 4 years ago and 5 years ago? He came back-to-back years to play with Fozzy here in Louisville, and he called me both times and asked me to do his podcast. One time, he actually had me meet him over at a recording studio here so we could have good audio. The second time, I guess Fozzy wasn't doing so well. He just taped it on a little thing in his hotel room, and then I dropped him off where he was playing the Fozzy concert. It was a crummy building in a part of town I didn't really want to be in, so I dropped him off at the back door without getting out of Black Beauty and took off afterwards. So I guess he was just doing a charity, a little charitable thing for me, being so irrelevant by him coming to my town and asking me to be on his podcast when I was minding my own business. I think it's more indicative, as I said, of the fact that they cannot get over the fact that people are listening to me because they're seeing the same thing, and they just happen to be more entertained by the way that I put things than the way that their fucking cousin Bill does it or whatever. That's why people are listening, because they're just as disgusted with the state of wrestling these days as I am. But Chris can't come out and say that his program that he's on needs a lot of fucking help, because that would insult the guy whose money he's taken and all of the kids that are allowing him to play with the cool kids at school.
Plus, he doesn't realize that. That's the one thing I still disagree with you on. He's one of the morons. It's not like he's like, well, I'm just taking the money, I'm going to let everyone do stupid things. No, he wants to do stupid things too. He's one of the stupid.
And that's fine, because it runs in a family, I guess. Because, again, I'm a racist. I'm such a racist that no members of my immediate family were in Washington on January 6th taking selfies in front of an insurrection against the United States government, trying to overthrow the lawfully and legally elected sane people that might be able to fix all the shit that the guy that he's given tens of thousands of dollars to fucked up. Or, here's another thing, since he's lying to begin with, Chris Jericho's in the business. Chris Jericho knows what the budgets are for some of the companies. And Chris Jericho knows that I didn't get fired from my last gig like it was a gig, that I got sideways with Liver Lip Lagana because he wouldn't take any of the fucking blame on himself when he shared in it and couldn't convey the fact that I told an old joke and instead tried to cover up his ass. I was doing shit for them as a favor. They were paying me to come down to it, to basically to drive to Atlanta and back. I was working for them for free. It was a minute amount of money, not for the NWA, honestly. I was making more money than anybody in the NWA except Nick Aldis, but it was still a minute amount of money per show, for which I did two. And that's the gig that I supposedly lost. So never try to do anybody any favors. But see, Jericho knows that. He knows it was a negligible amount of my money or anybody's money in this instance. And he knows that it wasn't a goddamn full-time job, like I'm suddenly the fucking lead announcer on Raw. But no, we've put an end to that. He's trying to paint in as ridiculously slanted a light as possible any way, any reason that people can doubt what I say. That's what it's been a year since they came up with the last big round trying to get me canceled. I'm a pervert and have, malfeasanced my office in OVW, and Stacy's such a horrible person. They made that up about a year ago.
Hot tub. And that didn't work because it was all bullshit and everybody figured it out, except for the people that don't want to know the truth because they want to hate me. The more that they can say that I'm a miserable person and I'm a racist and I'm a sexist and I'm a pervert and I fucking, just have horrible, horrible grooming habits, that in their mind discounts my opinion. And that in their mind discounts people listening to me when I'm telling the truth about the stupid bullshit that these guys do. So they can try all they want, but people have seen through it, because guess what? I don't get canceled because there's no reason to cancel shit. And you can't cancel it anyway. You can't cancel me unless you put me in jail, because I do my own thing. I don't work for anybody, and I don't give a fuck what anybody else thinks. So otherwise than putting me in Alcatraz, you're not going to cancel me. Here's an idea. Put on a better fucking program that I don't have to fucking tear apart piece by piece every week. Yeah.
Maybe that might work.
Yeah.
And you heard the newest one, right? When we talked about the Forbes, well, you told me this. We talked about the Forbes article on Tony and his land of misfit toys and his human action figures. And in the picture, Even though Brandy's been off TV for 9 months now, they just had a baby. She had to be in the picture. And so I said, oh, Jesus Christ. It looks like she's so big, she's smuggling a watermelon under her dress. Well, then you called me yesterday. You said, well, people are mad at you again. I said, what now? Well, you said that Brandy looked like she was smuggling a watermelon under her dress. And I said, well, what? Is the pregnant woman lobby now mad at me because pregnant women are fat and obese? And, I'm sorry, pregnancy, I've been medical phobic all my life. And pregnancy to me looks painful and uncomfortable. So it skeeves me out. I don't know where all these naked pictures of pregnant people have come into fashion over the last few years, where everybody gets pregnant has to have a naked picture put out on the internet. It looks uncomfortable to me. I'd rather not go through all of that.
For the record, I didn't say people were upset. I said someone's trying to stir people up.
Well, yeah. Well, but the same people, the people that are mad because more people listen to me and more people watch our shit and more people know who I am than they are. And I'm right about them when I speak about them. So they try to stir up other people. But anyway, you said, no, it's not because of the pregnancy people. It's because it's racist. I said, how is calling a pregnant woman fat racist? And then I realized Brandy was black. And I forgot about that because it wasn't important and it wasn't germane to the fucking conversation. But who's more racist? A person who actually forgets the race of the person that they're speaking about and just comments on their giant bulbous stomach? Or a person who hears someone reference a tasty, popular, juicy fruit or vegetable? I'm not actually sure which one is which.
It's a fruit.
Is it okay that a tasty, juicy fruit and immediately attaches a racist connotation to it when it's talking about the fact that most pregnant women are fat and bulbous and look uncomfortable and potentially painful.
Especially when the person doing the accusing is the person
well, I was
who did a promo in blackface.
Yeah. Okay, I forgot about that one. But the uncool ghoul is so desperate for attention. The podcasting's weirdest YouTuber is so well, if I just he actually put a clip, just like a clip of our show. See how that works out for you in the long run, since this shit's copyrighted, pal. But put a clip of our show of me saying that just to put an inflammatory headline on it. Because then you say, I've got to do
I need the money. I need the money. What else am I going to do? I read a Wikipedia. You have money.
I've got to pay my managers.
I have to pay up my portion of the rent to mom and dad from the basement.
I don't think his parents.
I could have been a star. I could have been a contender.
But anyway.
I'll pay you $300 to talk to me on Skype.
But anyway, so the same thing with Jericho's comments. There's got to be something wrong with him. We've got to be able to figure out something wrong with him why people shouldn't listen to him. No, I'm just actually telling the observable truth about what's going on. It's shitty wrestling. And that's what I do these days, since I don't need to work anymore, is I talk about what they've done to my business and how they've made it shitty wrestling. And every time, I wish one thing. I wish if they were going to insist that I have made horrible remarks about poor Cody and Brandy's baby, I wish they'd have waited till I got the new JimCornette.com up and my brand new web store for Cornette's Collectibles, because every time that they make up another one of these fictitious controversies to try to get me canceled, it bumps my income up. But I couldn't take advantage of this one, weak as it was, because my merchandise is not even on sale because I'm so busy, I can't bother to sell my own merchandise.
And by the way, we would wait a few months until they put the belt on the baby.
When they put the belt on the baby, JimCornette.com is going to be online, brother, because I'm going to get another. Hey, last summer, to be honest with you, when I turned out to be a pervert, that was a 6-figure boost in my income. So I'm interested to see if they can top that one. What else they can make up next will probably allow me to retire on a comfortable basis.
But
anyway,
back to Jericho.
Jericho's tweet.
And in terms of the relevancy thing, I mean, the thing that still to this day makes me laugh, everyone's entitled to their opinion. And I won't even talk about numbers or audience size or which podcast is more successful, which the answer is obvious. I won't even say anything else about someone else's numbers. But the relevancy thing gets me because you could say he's not relevant, Chris, and the Bucks can say that and tell themselves he's not relevant, and Kenny could say that. Unfortunately, the guy who signs your checks may think a little differently. That must suck.
What the fuck also, what do you have to do to be relevant? I have audio clips that we record on Skype that have nearly as many views on YouTube as their television program. What do you want a boy to do? I'm trying to retire over here. I got the Monroe brothers doing stonework out in the yard. I got things to keep an eye on. So how much more relevant do I need to be? I ain't got time to be this relevant.
Jim Cornette's not relevant, so I'm going to reply to this random person I've never seen before and let him know that. What?
It's hitting, as Dennis Condrey used to say, looks like we struck a nerve. We keep striking a nerve, and they can't come back with facts, and they certainly can't come back with witty repartee, so they just have to fucking try to make shit up to fire up the sad little folks that believe all of their bullshit. I was in a good mood until you started talking to me today.
Well, hey, let's try to get you back in a good mood. This next one may not be the one to do it, though. But I don't know. But no, this is an awkward topic, and it's one that several people over the last few days have been getting in touch with us about. And I don't know what you've seen, and if you haven't seen it, I encourage you not to. But there's a video going around about Paul Orndorff, and I'll read this question here. This was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Tom in Gloucestershire, England. I don't know if I pronounce that anywhere near correct, but what are your thoughts on the news that Paul Orndorff's health has seemed to take a turn for the worse recently? And he attached an article. Sad to see one of the all-time greats in poor health. One can only hope his fortunes will change soon. As I said, and I encourage everyone to not look for this, but Jim, have you seen the video in question? Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I have not. So I know that Paul's had health issues going back several years. He was, gosh, how many years ago? Well, was it 3 or 4 years ago we had him on the show here? Was this before you or after you?
This before me.
This was before you, but it should be on Patreon. But
it certainly is, yeah.
And I'm not trying to sell shit. I'm just saying he's been on this program several years ago. He told the story at that point of, so, the fight that he'd had with cancer. And he had a number of health issues. And the last time I talked to him on the phone was probably 3 or 4 years ago. I don't know how he's been doing recently. The thing is, I saw him in 2017 at a convention or fan fest or whatever. He'd lost a lot of weight. And his voice had been affected by the cancer, and also he mentioned to me, he said that because one time we'd lined him up to do the show, and then I called, I couldn't get him on the phone. And then I talked to him later on that night. He said, shit, I forgot. He said, it's medicine I'm taking. He fucks with my memory. So he wrote a note to himself and scotch taped it to the bottom of his TV screen. He said, that way I won't forget it. But I assume, with all the issues he's had, it probably has escalated, but I haven't seen anything lately or talked to him.
It appears he's suffering from, again, I don't know, but from Alzheimer's, and he's not shaven. His hair has grown long. He's in a medical gown. So I assume he's in, I hate to say medical facility, but I really don't know where he is, but It's a rather depressing look at someone who was always so strong, not just physically and, but mentally, just always such a iron-willed kind of guy. It's hard to see that. And, unfortunately, when you do, you start thinking about, Paul is in his late 60s, right? Early 70s? He's got to be somewhere in there.
Well, hold on. I first met him in 1977. He would have had to have been at least 25 years old. So, he's early 70s.
71.
Okay.
And he was a physical guy, and he played football, and then he wrestled a hard style for a long time in Mid-South and out.
But besides that, he did actual fights, non-sanctioned fights. He told me a lot. As a matter of fact, go back, if anybody does have the Patreon, go back and listen to that now, because I can't recount all those stories and do it justice. But he was a badass from the word go, and that's why Eddie Graham was so attracted to him and trained him at that point in time, because he not only was a high-level football player, and he not only could wrestle and handle himself, but he fought also. He did some underground fights for money, obviously, but and he was strong as a fucking bull, the Brandon Bull from Brandon, Florida. And we've told the stories about the fight he had with Vader. Everybody's got their own perspective on it, but almost everybody universally says, no, Paul won it walking off, and Leon wanted to relitigate it, and Paul would have won it again if they'd been allowed to. And I always liked Paul, and we got along great. He'd like me for whatever reason that may be, but that's why he worked for me so long early on in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. And it was Paul that reunited Bill Watts and I on the phone when Watts had taken the job at WCW. He'd been there for a few months, but he saw one of the TVs or heard from somebody about one of the TVs that Paul had been doing. And he called me that day, and he wanted other things to talk about, Watts did, but the pretext was, how's Paul doing? I'd love to get him back in here. I've always thought a lot about Paul. I said, hey, he's working great. He's performing, because he had taken time off when he had the nerve problem that led to his, left arm atrophying quite a bit. He had that neck problem when he was having that run with Hulk Hogan that was the most successful house show business run in the history of the WWF. And he wasn't about to fucking have surgery then, and he was making money, but he left it go so long that he had serious loss of power and strength and size and everything. And he had taken, a year and a half off from wrestling, and started working independence and started working for me. And then Watts called us. I said, hey, he's looking great. Watts arranged to bring him into WCW. That was early 93. And that's when we started doing the potential talent trade and the thing with the bodies and the Rock and Roll Express and the Smoky Mountain Invasion, blah, blah, blah. But Paul was the reason for that conversation starting. And of course, he always liked Watts. Watts used him great. He was a big deal in Mid-South, and that's when he was just a rookie.
Watts always has a story that years after the fact, years later, Orndorff randomly called him up to thank him and say he never appreciated all the lessons he learned in Mid-South and how hard he was on him and how he needed that until all these years later he finally appreciated it. He hated him at the time.
Yeah.
But now he appreciates it.
And that's the kind of thing that Paul would do. Because he was a very straight up and honest guy, but he didn't take any bullshit. But he, would look back on something and say, you know what? He did a lot for me. When I first met him, like I said, in 77, that Memphis was his first territory besides Florida, because they had broken him in and trained him. And they had training footage that they showed on Memphis TV to get people ready for him, of Paul Orndorff and Bob Backlund doing training in the ring in Florida, like they trained the wrestlers down there, and the Eddie Graham and the Matsuda and those guys, where they're doing these wild calisthenics and they're doing squats with each other on their shoulders. And the deal where they would lock legs, and like what a neck bridge looks like, right? Your feet and your neck.
Yeah.
Well, some way they would do the thing where they would do that neck bridge, but they would lock legs, and they would somehow be doing sit-ups out of that. It was a goddamn, Backlund and Orndorff, freaks, just athletic freaks, right? So when he came in, he was green as grass, but we didn't know it because we had seen this, and this looked like somebody's training a cyborg wrestler in a fucking laboratory somewhere. And, of course, they brought him right in and put him over a couple of underneath heels in like seconds with the belly-to-belly or the side salto. And then he worked with Lawler for the Southern title, and they put the title on Orndorff because Lawler, see Mark Henry 20 years later, Lawler could work with anybody. He knew whatever the guy's strength was and what he could do, and he would make a whole match out of that. So instantly, Paul Orndorff was a main event guy here. greener than a pepper tree. But the way he looked and the physique and, just his overall presentation, people bought it. And from there on, by the time he went to work for Watts next, and he was in not only Mid-South, but then went to, where was it next before the Carolinas? And then teamed up with Snuka.
Oh, no, that was before all of that. Carolinas was before Mid-South.
Was it Carolinas then Mid-South? Yeah, that's right. Because Carolinas and Snuka and Orndorff was what,
78,
79?
Yeah.
And then Orndorff working with DiBiase in Mid-South was 80, 81-ish. Anyway, Orndorff, and still in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, that's what gave me a lot of credibility to go into TV stations early on and try to sell the show when I say, look, here's Paul Orndorff. Just 5 years ago, he was wrestling Hulk Hogan in the biggest promotion in the world. And guys like him and Ronnie Garvin, who had some TV matches, it was just a higher level of work. You could tell these guys were talented. And this was, this was not just a fucking local cable access wrestling program when you have guys like that on. So he was a huge help. I've always liked Paul. Like I said, we always got along great. He's a hoot too. If he's on your side, he can be a funny motherfucker. If he don't like you, as Leon found out when he pissed him off, he can knock you the fuck out. But, just what a man all the way around. What a fucking tough guy.
Unfortunately, we're seeing a lot more of this guys once they get to their 70s. Guys that you don't think of as being the crazy spot takers or anything. But the Nick Bockwinkel's, the Red Bastines, and now Paul Orndorff, where it's getting to be a trend, and it's pretty depressing. It's pretty sad to see.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. Regardless of whether they took ridiculous risks back in those days like the guys do now, which most of the vast majority of guys did not. You had your Chris Colts and your Mike Boyettes and your, guys that took wild bumps just for the fuck of it. But the thing is, the guys in the territory days wrestled regularly, even though they were such experienced workers and they knew not to do things stupid. It was constant repetition. Every body slam, every flat back bump, as the chiropractors will tell you, is the equivalent of a 35-mile-an-hour rear-end collision in a car. It's not going to fucking paralyze you, but it's going to, over a period of time, if you do it over and over, it's going to give you whiplash and spinal problem, whatever else. And the same thing goes, even though you're not landing on your head, your body is at some velocity coming to a sudden stop, and that sloshes your brain around. So think of, a guy like Nick Bockwinkel, who was one of the sharpest intellects in the business, but he also took at least 5 body slams 6 nights a week for 25 years. So that's why I look at these guys. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? You've completely lost the plot on this. Nobody believes it's real. They know y'all are working together, but you're taking more physical risks. And not only that, but you're making the people immune to the big bumps that you can take safely because you pop right back up from them. And then you have to take a bigger one that you can't take as safely, and they still don't believe it because they know it's fake to begin with. Or just act like the shit you can control hurts. Because is somebody really going to find a wrestling ring and have somebody else give them a vertical suplex just so they know what it feels like? Or can they just say, wow, look, he picked that guy up, dropped him flat of his back from 6 feet in the air, and the guy's laying there. Must have knocked the wind out of him. Anyway, but I wish Paul Orndorff all the best. I was a fan of his as a fan, and I was always happy when we could work together, and he's a heck of a guy.
We certainly hope for the best, but Jim, let me move on to the next story. A couple people sent this in. I'll read you the article. I was surprised by this. I want to get your take on it, but this is from WMC TV Channel 5, their website. Jerry the King Lawler...
1960 Union Avenue.
Jerry the King Lawler plays final softball game after 40 years of Lawler's Army.
I saw that on Twitter.
Well, I guess I don't have to read the whole article here, but then what do you...
Well, no, you can read it, but I'm just saying I've seen this. I saw this, but for the folks who don't know, you can read what they said.
He's known as the King in the ring, an artist, and now we introduce you to Jerry Lawler, the softball player. For more than 40 years, Jerry the King Lawler has escaped the wrestling limelight on the diamond. Here's a quote from Jerry. This, the softball, being on the field, look at this. There's nothing better than being on a baseball field or on a softball field. The bright sun and all your friends out, you can't beat it. For the past 4 decades, well, what a cheery guy Lawler is. Jesus.
I'll tell you, Lawler does not get wound up about a lot.
For the past 4 decades, the King's team, Lawler's Army, by the way, WMC, commas, look into them.
Yeah.
Lawler's Army has met one night a week to play beer league softball. It's a hand-picked team. Some members have been on the team for decades and now have their sons playing with them. Here's a quote from Rick Gresham. It's been fun playing with him for 30 years. Not many people have gotten to play with him. Ricky's sons, Hunter and Zach, grew up watching Lawler's Army games. It's been fun, Zach said. Growing up watching Jerry's been fun. Every time I watched, I wanted to play. So now I get to play. His older brother, Hunter, said, we look forward to it. Thursday night, and it's just been a journey. We've had really good seasons and won it all, and we've had okay seasons and still made our way to the championship. This season, the team found their way to the championship game again, a game Lawler wouldn't miss for the world. Here's another quote from Jerry. I cut my vacation in Fort Myers, Florida short just to get back for this game.
Yeah.
Well, the championship game had a little bit more meaning, not just because it was the championship game. It was the final game Lawler's Army would play. Here's a quote from Jerry. No, it stops. It's it. No more Lawler's Army after this, Lawler said when asked if someone could continue the team. The King treated it like any other night, but the game drew a crowd. Fans, friends, and former players. Jerry Calhoun was on the first Lawler's Army team.
I was about to ask if Calhoun was there.
He played for nearly 20 years. Let's not talk about why he stopped playing. Here's a quote from Jerry Calhoun. When I just talked to him, I said, I can't believe it. I thought you'd be playing until you couldn't walk anymore. And I'm right on that because he can hardly walk now. Even WMC Action 5 Chief Emeritus Meteorologist Dave Brown wouldn't miss the Kings' last softball game. It's not bittersweet. It's just looking at it as another night at the ballpark, Lawler said. On another night at the ballpark, Jerry the King Lawler went out in the most fitting way. Lawler's Army won the final championship game in the team's final game. So there's the article. I'd like to get your thoughts, memories of Lawler's Army against the WFIA, but also, are you surprised? I mean, they didn't say why he's stopping. Are you surprised to hear Lawler's not going to be playing softball anymore?
Truthfully, I am, and it makes me worry about him a little bit. But he still wrestles every now and then, as long as Bert Prentice is still breathing. He's going to be 72 this year, this November 29th. And the thing, the Lawler's Army, the name came from when he was a heel in 76 and 77. He did the general's outfit in the King's Army. He became not only the top heel, but he was the top heel manager of this group of guys that he had in the Army. That way they were always trying to figure out a way to get more use out of Lawler, him and Jarrett, because it would draw. So,
which is why every kid who grew up watching Lawler who got into the business later wore a helmet and fatigues like you and Eddie Gilbert and anyone who saw Lawler's Army.
Because the King's Army. And, we all stole that stuff. At one point, literally, they were having Lawler when Jarrett had first started his company, and parts of 77 was a little rough, just getting, talent in and doing things. So they would have him in 2 main event programs at the same time, and he would do double duty and wrestle 2 main event matches on the same card the same night when nobody did that. But just because it was better than having another guy in that other spot because he was, that hot. Anyway, so the King's Army became Lawler's Army, the softball team, which was Lawler's always loved sports. You can't tell it. He's never been on the inside of a gym in his life. Everybody knows that. And I find it funny it's a beer league team when everybody knows he's never had a drink of alcohol in his life. But Lawler's always loved sports. He's a football fan. He's a baseball fan. He likes to play them and watch them. And for a guy who's never, he was never an athlete at a high organized level in school, and he's never worked out, but he always likes to do those things. And even though he's always played softball, the King's Army softball team was somewhat of a compromise between him and Jerry Jarrett when Jerry Calhoun, that no good referee, who also happened to be his brother-in-law at the time, broke Lawler. He's the one that broke Lawler's leg in that football game in 1980, early 1980, because Jarrett had been out. They would play him and Calhoun and all his guys. Jim Jamison, some of those guys that would do jobs on TV on Saturday mornings were friends of Lawler in his social circle. And they would go out and play what they claimed was flag football on Sunday afternoons in Memphis. And Jarrett went out there one time and said, well, fuck, it looks like goddamn they're trying to tackle like the NFL. This is insane. What are you doing? If you get hurt, you'll cost us a fortune. Our territory will go out of business. And wouldn't you know who won the pony? Within months after he had said that,
Calhoun.
They were playing flag football where you're supposed to fucking rip the flag off the guy's belt, right? But Calhoun tackled Lawler, and it was muddy. It was wet that day, and Lawler's foot got stuck in the mud, and it snapped his leg. And that's what, when Jarrett found out about it, that's the heat between Lawler and Hart that Jimmy Hart will tell you about to this day led to him getting his jaw broken when Lawler came back, was because Jarrett was so goddamn mad that potentially Lawler had cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars. Well, not potentially, he had. And potentially more than that he immediately figured out a way, okay, we're going to take Jimmy Hart, who'd just been the stooge manager in the corner, and we're going to bring somebody in for him, and we're going to give them Lawler's crown, and we're going to, carry on with this thing and put all the heat on Hart. So when Lawler is actually laying in the hospital bed the next Saturday morning and sees the TV, and he knows that Jerry Jarrett's mad at him because this warning has taken place already, you're going to put us out of business. He sees Jimmy Hart with his crown giving it to fucking, who was the first one? Paul Ellering.
Ellering, yeah.
And when Paul Ellering was just coming up and said, what do you do with a horse when he breaks his leg? You shoot him. Lawler got hot because he's in the hospital with a broken leg. And so later on, when Lawler came back, I was there that night. I got a picture of it. He's handcuffed to Jimmy Hart at ringside, so Hart can't interfere, whatever the fuck. Lawler's leg's still not healed. But when he turned around and nailed Hart, if your left arm is immobilized to somebody else's and you're swinging with your right, you can be off a little bit. But Jerry Lawler, the master of the punch, I'm the only manager that ever worked the Memphis territory. He didn't break my fucking jaw. He never hit me hard once. He broke Hart's jaw. He broke Heyman's jaw. And he broke Sal Correnti's jaw, I think. But anyway, so that's what happened. And they, when Lawler ended up being out from the middle of February until the end of December, it cost him well over $100,000 in income. And that's why he was still had a piece of the territory, and they still used him a bit. But I mean, what he couldn't actually wrestle for, it cost the company several $100,000 cumulatively at the gate over that period of time. Because, well, we've mentioned that by the time that he came back at the end of December, the previous week's crowd in Memphis was down to like 2,800 people, which was a modern era low. And then he comes back on December 29th, right before New Year's, and they sold out 11,000 and turned a few thousand away. And from then on, 81 was really strong off that because the people missed him because he'd been gone so long. But that was a fiasco that year. So that he segued into baseball, softball, as opposed to football, so that nothing like that would happen again. But I'm like Calhoun or whoever said that, I am surprised that if he can still walk, he's not going to play. But at the same time, he's going to be 72 years old. We've all had to quit doing shit that we used to really like to do and would do for fun. But it's just stupid now because it's just a rib on us. I honestly, I haven't been inside a wrestling ring in a year and a half. But if I got in one, I would want to drop an elbow or just take a bump just to see if I could still do it and what it would feel like, and I'd probably end up hurting myself. So I'm just staying away.
All right, well, let's get another question here on the show, Jim. Another popular topic that I've been meaning to ask you about. Many people have sent in questions. AEW, not just running in Newark, but the next week, I believe the date, let me get it here, September 22nd, Arthur Ashe Stadium in Queens, 24,000 seats approximately. What are your thoughts on AEW doing a stadium show in New York in September? And again, the one other thing people have been pointing out, a week after their other show in the tri-state area.
Well, and it's not even I just love the Arthur Ashe Tennis Stadium. It's just how non-violent can a place sound to have a wrestling event? I don't know why they're doing a stadium a week after they're in technically the same market. I know New York is a big-ass place, but that just seems a bit odd, as you said. But it's not the fact that they're doing a show in New York. It's just that and this is another place, they've never had wrestling there before because it's a hootsy-tootsy tennis stadium, right? I mean, you wouldn't expect to have, a wrestling ring set up center court at Wimbledon either. But this is another one. I'm sure Tony Khan has these connections with these people that own these places, so he was able to get in where can you see some fucking independent New York pro wrestling fucking group trying to get in the Arthur Ashe Tennis Stadium? I think not. But I was just funny. I was like, what's next? Maybe they're going to do fucking halftime at Cirque du Soleil. It just sounds so non-threatening. Oh, in the tennis stadium. But I'm sure they'll do well. It's New York, and there's a bunch of people in New York that like independent wrestling. I don't know why they're like we said, glomming their dates together in the same kind of metropolitan area. That seems to be. They're not going to put 23,000 people in the tennis stadium. If they do, then we'll come back here and I'll go, God damn, they did. But if they're not going to put 23,000 people in a stadium, why are they running a week after, like you said, that they've just been down the road? It seems like that would be a conflict. I'd spread things out. But
you don't think they can get 23,000 people in there?
Well, I think they can get 23,000 people in the stadium. I don't think they're going to draw 23,000 people.
Well, I mean, semantics in a sense. You're not even saying
the stadium will hold 23,000 people.
That's not what I'm saying.
I do not believe
Come on.
that 23,000 people will be there to see AEW wrestling. I would find that one hard to believe, especially if they're. And where's the other building the week before?
Newark.
But it's not. That's not the Barclays Center. That's in Brooklyn. It's the what's the building?
Prudential.
Says that used to be the. No, that's and even the Meadowlands is a different building yet. Or is that
no? Meadowlands is a completely different facility.
All right. The point is they got a lot of them, but if they're going to be across in Newark, and then the next week they're running a stadium in New York, I'm just saying is somebody acting like they're going to have 23,000 people at that stadium for just a house show? This is not a pay-per-view, right?
It is a episode of Dynamite, I believe.
Is it okay even for a TV taping? That would be an accomplishment. I would have to tip my hat to them. And I'd have to tip my hat to AEW and roll my eyes at 23,000 people that would go outdoors in September in the New York area to see a show like this. But
no, it won't be that bad. It won't be that bad.
But anyway, but no, is somebody saying they're going to sell this out?
I have not seen anything where anyone's predicted that. I have not even seen AEW or Tony Khan quotes. I mean, if they're out there, I haven't seen them where they're predicting that.
Okay, well, all right then. I'm sure they'll do very well, but there ain't gonna be 23,000 people there.
I have to say, I think this is a fantastic idea, and I'm surprised it took so long for someone to jump on it. There are several places in the New York area. You need a budget. You can't just be Johnny fucking Mud Show and promote a show there. But there are good places WWE doesn't do. This is one of them. Again, you're worried about the weather. It's right next to Citi Field, which is in the parking lot of what was Shea Stadium. So it's in that complex. There's parking. It's a great place. And that building is built perfect. A tennis stadium? And that is built perfect to watch wrestling. Right in the middle. I think this is a great idea.
Yeah. Well, but see, here's what I'm saying to you is you not only have to have a budget, but you have to have connections, because there's been a lot of facilities, venues, buildings, whatever, over the years that some people have said, boy, if I could just get in there and have a show in there, they don't want wrestling. It's not a part of their, mission statement. They don't want the fucking violence. They don't want the fucking crowd. They don't want the whatever they don't want is whatever they don't like about wrestling. But there's been a lot of places that, the reason why you said nobody's done this, besides having a budget, if the average jackleg wrestling promoter walked in with a check for the rent and still said, I want to have a wrestling show here, they'd say, fuck you, because they don't need it. So a lot of those places, the reason why they haven't been run is because they don't want wrestling to begin with. But then you go in and you're the owner of an NFL team or whatever the case may be, that changes some minds.
I am so curious to see how they blanket the area with advertising and publicity as we get closer to the date. I'm really curious how they do.
Well, you know the Dutch Mantel fucking premise, don't you? Every time that me and Dutch and the Midnight Express, we'd go up to the Northeast, you'd be driving down those turnpikes and parkways and you'd see those apartment buildings. But literally, those giant New York apartment buildings, there has to be 5,000 people living in that apartment building, right? And Dutch Mantel would say, if you just had an inter-building radio station where everybody listened to the radio station that lived in that building every day to get all the news and the gossip and whatever the case. And if you were just to say, hey, old Bill in 14A and old Jerry down in 26B, they're finally going to have it out. We've been hearing them yell and cuss and fuss and fight and everything. Now they're going to have it out in the laundry room Thursday night at 7:30. They're going to fight. Everybody be there. It's only $2 a head. You would draw 1,000 people in that building, right? So they've got so many people.
That's how hip hop started.
There you go. There's so many people in that area. Just fucking put a goddamn postcard flyer in everybody's goddamn mailbox or whatever that lives within 1,000 yards and you'd have 10,000 people. Anyway. Next.
All right. Well, let's get another question here. This is an interesting one because it was sent to me from someone else for someone else. This comes to me via John Fell in Baltimore on behalf of Lee Petrie, Ashburn, Virginia.
Petrie.
You sure it's not Petrie?
Just like Rob and Laura.
Of the Petri dish fortune?
He's not a fungal growth. He's a very fine young man, not a fungal growth.
In 2017 at WrestleCade, you managed Dan Severn in what would be your last ever match as a manager. As fate would have it, I had the pleasure of riding down in the elevator with you before the matches and did my best to help guide you towards the locker room area. My apologies for all those steps. On that walk, someone yelled your name from down the hall. It was none other than Dave McLane of Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling fame.
Yes.
You greeted each other and then began comparing notes on old Chicago wrestling stories before he had to shuffle off to his pre-match prep. My questions: how long have you known Dave McLane? And besides Glow, what were his wrestling influences growing up?
Well, believe it or not, don't even make it plural. Wrestling influence, Dick the Bruiser in Indianapolis. And where that took a right or left turn to Glow, I have no idea. But Dave McLane, I met him in 1975, same time as I met Scott Romer. Dave McLane and Scott Romer were the two most established, most prolific photographers in Indianapolis that worked for, did work for Dick the Bruiser. Romer did a lot more photography for the Japanese magazine. Still, he came and covered some OVW stuff back in the early 2000s. And he would travel quite a bit. And it ended up briefly for a period of time being Bruiser's son-in-law when Spike Huber met the young lady in Memphis on his first trip out of the territory. Anyway, so Scott was more of the photographer, but Dave McLane was also a photographer. But as the territory was aging out and Sam Miniker had left and gone back to El Paso and et cetera, Dave started doing the TV and the stand-up interviews and some of the commentary for the last couple of years or however long that Bruiser's promotion was around. And then by the mid-'80s, he had met whoever he needed to meet and done whatever he needed to do to set up running Glow. And everybody knows I was not a fan of Glow because Glow was silly, phony wrestling parody. Whether it was men or women didn't make any difference. They weren't taking it seriously. It was a comedy program.
And now looking back, how influential was it on modern wrestling?
Unfortunately, and as soon as it got syndicated, see, the thing is, it was hot for a year and they did 2 or 3 years, but they did 2 or 3 years because it was hot the first year. And by the time that all the stuff they had in the can started playing out, it had played out. The bloom was off the rose and the thrill was over for everything. But the first 1 year, it was really hot. And it was on TV in Charlotte. And I'm like, my God, it was we're doing our, Crockett Promotions TV show and we're doing this fucking huge business. But I'm thinking the more people that see this, they're going to start realizing, because when you do a parody of wrestling and it's obviously phony, but the moves look the same as when the guys that are doing it for real, that's always been to me subliminally bad. So I wasn't going to fucking beat Dave McLane up for what he did 35 years ago. And we're not close personal friends that talk on a regular basis, but we've known each other on and off for quite a few years. And that's where that conversation took place. But actually, now that I think of it, 80s Glow wasn't nearly as silly and tongue-in-cheek as 2021 AEW.
If you watch 1980s Mid-South, Crockett Promotions, even WWF and Glow, and you didn't know anything about wrestling history, and then you watched an episode of Raw or SmackDown today, you would think Glow was the most influential wrestling show of all time.
Yes, you would, because it's kind of the same thing now that we laughed at and looked down on, and now that's what it's turned into. But yes, Dave McLane.
All right, Jim, we have a few more questions, but first, a update from one of the listeners. This sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Martin, St. Helens, England. Just listening to the experience, and you were talking about FTR and how many matches or lack thereof they've wrestled lately. According to, and there is some website here that I'm not going to read this entire link, FTR have wrestled 4 regular tag team matches this calendar year, 2 of which were on the YouTube show and 2 on Dynamite. Then you've got 3 6 or 8-man matches, and then 2 gimmick matches at the last pay-per-views. This is over half of the matches the Bucks have had. Surely as the best tag team on the planet, this isn't what they signed up for. Well, I think the thing is they're actually happy there, but that answers the question, Jim, about how many matches they've had on TV.
Well, hey, every 6 months, the Midnight Express would wrestle twice. And that's
a
what
weekend?
got them over, where people still remember 35 years later, 40 years later.
All right, our next question sent to CornyDriveThru.
Is labeled the last one? Is that what you just said?
That wasn't what I said. Are you insisting on it being the last one?
It's such beautiful weather outside as I'm looking over my shoulder, but I don't want to insist around your program.
2 more questions.
All right.
Because it is my program. This next one was sent on Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru from Big Oos Sapgood. I believe he has submitted questions in the past. What do you guys think of former WWE wrestler that was released a few months back talking about a meeting she had with Vince? Not for nothing, if this is true, then I guess she shot herself in the foot, and he attached a quote here. It is.
I'm hoping the quote will help clarify and bring into focus what the fuck this is going on about.
One of the recently released wrestlers, Peyton Royce, I guess she has a podcast of her own now, and the headline is, recalls terrible meeting with Vince McMahon and believes it led to her release. So here's the quote, Jim.
Okay.
This is when you were drafted to SmackDown, and I decided to put on my big girl panties and talk to Vince. I had it in my head what I wanted to say, but he brushed it off very quickly, and I went, crap. I had an idea that I wanted to present, and he wanted to discuss other ideas, but I didn't have other ideas. This is what I wanted to talk about and put my time and effort into. Vince says, what do you do for fun? Me being me, the introvert and the homebody that I am, I had to let him know that I like to sit on the couch with my dogs and watch TV. He just stared at me and said, okay, what's your plans? In my head, I'm just like, make something up. And I couldn't make anything up. Nothing was coming out. I'm not a liar. I feel like he could have seen right through that. I basically said to him, I'm sorry, I'm boring, and I just like to be home on my off days. I didn't contribute much during that, unfortunately, and that's probably why I lost the job.
I would say that she hit that nail right on the head.
Jim, what are your thoughts about the idea of a talent going in there to meet with Vince? They're not happy with how they're being used. Take it from there. What happens?
Well, first of all, the thing is, JR's favorite phrase is something you can hang your hat on. Some factoid or piece of information or trait or habit or hobby or whatever, something you can hang your hat on about this person. That's what we're going to market and say. And Vince always loves that shit. That's why he sits down and talks with everybody about everything but wrestling. And that's how people get bad gimmicks. Like poor Bill Irwin became the Goon because he used to play hockey because he was from Minnesota or whatever. But that's how a lot of that comes up. And we've told the story recently. Mick Foley was able to take Mason the Mutilator and become Mankind because he can think quick on his feet and still give Vince what he wanted, which was something in Vince's mind you can hang your hat on about this person. So when she went in there with one idea that he kind of brushed off and she had nothing as a backup and she's got no answers, and she comes out and tells him that he knew that I was a guy that liked to sit around on the couch, but I'm such a goddamn weird personality for good, bad, or indifferent that there was always something to be Cornette's entertaining, right, pal, whatever. But if you go up and you just say to Vince, well, I just like to sit around on the couch and pet my dog, the eye roll I can see right now. Even if that's true, he wants something. So I can honestly see Vince sitting there going, give me something. What do you like? What do you do? Something about you. He was getting nothing. And he probably thought, I don't know what we can do with her. But that's his thing. I learned Bill Watts, when we first went to Mid-South, said if a heel if a wrestler, but especially a heel, because that in those days, heels called the match and etc. But if a guy goes to work and he's a wrestler and he doesn't show up with a way that he can win and a way that he can lose, all ready to present to whoever the booker is that will be beneficial to him but still get across what needs to be done, then it's like a carpenter going to work with no fucking toolbox. And if you get a chance to talk to Vince and you not only have your main idea but a few other ideas, and also if you read that those aren't going very well but he says something that you can riff off of, or come up with something that complements that, like in creative meetings is just sitting around bouncing ideas. Well, what if so-and-so did that? No, that would be kind of fucking screwy, but what if he did this instead? But it's kind of like that. Okay, just talk about ideas. But if you're just sitting there, I got nothing, Vince. Well, he's got nothing either. You want to be used more than he wants to use you. So the burden is on you to come up with something. And then it's a bigger if they won't listen to it. That's another thing. There's been great ideas presented that they wouldn't listen to, but at least you've got something. But sitting on the couch playing with the dog works for me. That sounds like my kind of girl.
Not necessarily a good gimmick for wrestling, though.
No, not necessarily for somebody you want to pay to see.
All right, well, here is what could possibly be our final question.
Well, wait till you hear me answer it, and you'll know it is.
Sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from John Smirka in Masontown, West Virginia.
I love to smirka about the worka and the twerka and... All right.
Oh, it's so stupid, yet it made me laugh. I just finished reading some quotes from Jim Ross. He claims that Vader almost got fired because he refused to lose to the Ultimate Warrior at a house show in Rosemont, Illinois. Vader's reasoning was he thought it would be financially detrimental to his Japanese wrestling career. My first thought is, why did Vader think that? I'm assuming it was untelevised. Secondly, can Jim verify this? Did it actually happen? If so, is Jim responsible for saving Vader's job?
No, I'm not. Well, yes, I remember I wouldn't have been able to pick the Rosemont Horizon in Chicago out of it. I remember there was at some point that he was booked with the brief period of time where the Ultimate Warrior returned at WrestleMania 96, and he was there for 2 months until they got sideways again, and then Sid came in to replace him, right? By the summertime. But there was some point in time where, as I recall, Vader was booked against Warrior and would not put him over. At the time, I was managing Vader that year, but as we know, I made selected house shows, only like bigger ones, either in the Northeast or if I was doing something with Jose Lothario, but normally it was just TV and pay-per-view. So I think this was a house show, but it was just... he wasn't going to fucking do the job for Vader. I'm sure he probably told JR or whoever was on scene it was something to do with Japan, because Leon still thought that way, and it was still... Remember, here's the thing. He's just come to the WWF. They started him with that great angle where he hospitalized Gorilla Monsoon, but then he had to take time off for shoulder surgery, which is why that he got suspended. And I've always thought that timing is the way it started off for him. It went downhill from there because we couldn't capitalize on the big angle. But anyway, he's only been there a few months. He has been a huge name in Japan and a world champion all over the globe for the previous several years. And also, it's the Ultimate Warrior. He had seen what Warrior did with Triple H when he popped up from the fucking pedigree and beat him flat in 2 minutes. He knew Warrior was probably not going to sell much, if at all, and he was not going to, whether it was a house show or whether it was on TV or whatever, he was not going to give the Ultimate Warrior a flat, convincing, one-sided win, which is what they almost always turned out to be, over him. And so they did a count out, as I recall. I remember hearing about it. I'm pretty sure I was not there because I don't remember ever managing Leon against the Warrior. I remember there was a couple of 6-mans, things like that. But anyway, I don't have a ton of details otherwise. And I'm sure he probably said, well, I can't do it because, Japan, because that was a big deal also. Vader could go back to Japan the next year or two, which he ended up doing, and still make big fucking payoffs because of his name. But if they
Chicago, which is a major market where you may get a Japanese wrestling photographer.
Yeah.
If they have photos of him losing to the Ultimate Warrior in 8 minutes, you got a problem.
Yeah, especially if there's Leon and his big fucking belly laid out flat in the ring and Warrior's got his foot on his chest or some shit. Yeah, that wasn't going to fly. And and to be honest, that's the old way of doing business, especially for guys with big Japanese commitments, and everybody understood. If you're figured in Japan, because in those days, the Japanese photographers for Gong magazine and all the other magazines traveled over here regularly, and videotape had become a thing in the 80s. And that's why a lot of guys, when they left a territory, if they had Japanese deals, they would say, I'm going to do my jobs on the way out, but they won't be taped. And as that was not for Japan, but just for business reasons. That was the thing that set off the issue between Ernie Ladd and the Briscoe brothers, because Ernie was doing his 2 weeks jobs on the way out of Florida because he had given his notice. He had another spot to make more money, and they were under the agreement that none of those jobs would be filmed or shown on television. And Ernie got in the ring one of the last nights, and he saw the red light on up in the bleachers. And so he walked out of the fucking match without doing a job. And then he and the Briscoes got sideways out in the parking lot later on that night. And we've told that story a million times. But no, that I don't blame Leon. For all the guys who were signed to the WWF, were either signed for multiple years or had been there a while, or that was their goal. Even then, sometimes it was hard to get them to do a fucking exact finish the way you wanted it, but you could work with it. But with the Warrior, who was an egregious example of a selfish opponent, and Leon, who was very old school about his Japanese deal, that wasn't going to happen. And I applaud him for not laying down for that selfish fucking prick.
The other interesting thing is, before the Ultimate Warrior got signed by the WWF in 1987, what was he going to do?
He was going to be the original Big Van Vader in New Japan, and that would have doomed that gimmick.
It would have doomed that company.
It would actually, think about this. Everybody, because he did not take that job, everybody turned out better. Leon White was a much better Vader than the Warrior ever would have been, and he got the gimmick over and got himself over, which he had never really been a big star before. Warrior would have bombed out of New Japan, and he and Inoki would have probably had a knife fight within months. So instead, he goes to work for Vince, whose the promotion is tailor-made for pushing a guy with that level of talent, let's say. So he prospered, Vince prospered, Inoki prospered, Leon prospered. If the Warrior had taken that one spot, none of those people would have made any money. So there you have it.
But on the other hand, we would have gotten a chance to see the Ultimate Warrior versus Tatsumi Fujinami.
Oh, boy. And then poor Fujinami, one of the legends of Japanese wrestling, would have had the shit kicked out of him and fucking the legs cut out from under him. One match against the Warrior would have destroyed Fujinami's reputation.
All right. Well, with that, we have wrapped up the question portion of this show.
That was it? Okay. Well, in that case, I was going to say 2 after this point. How can you follow that?
I'll use the deluxe one today. I'll drop that one. All right. We'll be back with you on The Experience. I'm not even sure what we're going to be talking about on The Experience.
We'll figure it out between now and then.
But we will be there Saturday at some point, wherever you find your favorite podcast. Of course, back next week here on the Drive Thru. Jim mentioned it earlier. Get access to classic episodes of the Drive Thru and The Experience by becoming a patron. Patreon.com/Cornette. For only $5 a month, you get access to the archive of shows from the very beginning in 2013. Patreon.com/Cornette. Don't forget to subscribe to the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel, over 222,000 strong and growing every single day on our march to 1 million. Subscribe today and check out those videos with the exclusive Travis Heckel artwork, the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel. You can follow Jim on Twitter at @TheJimCornette. You can follow me on Twitter at GreatBrianLast. You can hear me on the 605 Superpodcast at 605pod.com, available wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Don't forget about Cornette's Collectibles at JimCornette.com. We're getting ready for lots of things, including the Great American Cameo Bash at JimCornette.com. The Drive-Thru is brought to you by the Law Office of Stephen P. New, 888-692-8084. Get even with Stephen at newlawoffice.com. But until Saturday on The Experience and next week right back here on the Drive-Thru, for Jim Cornette, I'm the Great Brian Last. Tally-ho!